as we start the new working week. Still the risk of some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle too, but there will be some brighter skies developing in places, Northern Ireland, the far north of Scotland, and eventually into East Anglia and the southeast as we approach lunchtime. So in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm for the time of year, highs reaching 18 or 19 degrees, but elsewhere around par for this time of year. Into the evening, we may well see some late sunshine developing across the Midlands, central southern England, but then that quickly gets replaced by further cloud across the country as we go into the small hours of Tuesday. So again, under the cloud, no real problems with the temperatures, not falling much lower than around 7 or 8 degrees across the country. So on Tuesday, we will then start to see some clearer skies move right across the country as we go through the course of the day. So it could be a bit of a grey, slow start in places, but sunshine will be on the way across most of the country. We do start to pick up a bit of a easterly breeze, however, so feeling quite chilly along some eastern coasts, but further inland, certainly feeling pleasantly warm in the sunshine. Wednesday, Thursday, remaining very similar across the country.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But next up, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with GB News presenter and former MEP Martin Thornbury, and also former editor of The Labellist Peter Edwards. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon to you. It's 3:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary's urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer recommended to RCN members was a fair and reasonable settlement, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government, though, for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay rise.
Our members neither think it's reasonable or fair. It's a short-term approach that plugs a gap by giving them a one-off, what they've described as a bonus. That's certainly not going to address the fundamental crisis that we've got within our nursing profession or within the NHS.
Meanwhile, Labour's vowed to end what it has described as a postcode lottery for GP appointments if it wins the next election. The party says up to three-quarters of patients in some parts of England aren't able to see their doctor of choice, and only half of appointments are held face-to-face. Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained every year to 15,000, and Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says young people need more opportunities to enter the profession.
Unless the NHS has the staff it needs, it's going to struggle to treat patients on time. And we're going to end up in this bizarre situation where, on one hand, we're turning away straight A-grade students from studying medicine at university, whilst recruiting people from overseas in greater numbers than we're training our own homegrown staff, which is not fair to other countries around the world. But even more importantly, it's not fair to bright teenagers in Britain who could be promising doctors and medics of the future who are being denied the opportunity.
Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled because of concerns over safety, cost and low public confidence. The government's confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The Conservative Party chairman Greg Hands told Camilla Tominey the government are putting public safety first.
It's been right for us to, as I said, look at the evidence, to come about it with bearing in mind all the factors that are involved, and that's why we've taken the decision, as a result of the public concern, to cease new smart motorways. That's what I think is the right decision.
Animal rights activists are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at the Grand National Festival. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, delaying the start of the race. Animal Rising, the campaign group, wants to see more stringent safety measures implemented and has warned further protests will take place over the summer. In a statement, the British Horse Racing Authority robustly condemned the action, adding it's investigating what caused the fatalities. Global leaders are holding crisis talks in an effort to bring an end to a second day of heavy fighting in Sudan. At least 56 civilians have been killed and almost 600 injured as the army and paramilitary forces battle for control across the capital, Khartoum. Both sides claim to have taken the airport, the presidential palace and state TV. Tensions have escalated recently as rival factions negotiate over a proposed transition to civilian rule following a military coup in 2021. The US, China, the EU and UN are among a number of international powers appealing for an immediate end to hostilities. The UK will use the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Japan to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. James Cleverly says the region is critical to the UK's economy, security and values. Britain recently joined a major Indo-Pacific bloc, its biggest trade deal since leaving the EU. The meeting in Japan is also expected to focus on support for Ukraine and closer security and defence ties to counter the threat of China. And thousands of armed forces veterans and NHS workers will get to watch the coronation from a special platform in front of Buckingham Palace. They'll get a close-up view of key moments on the 6th of May, including the processions, the appearance of the royal family on the balcony, and a flypast by the armed forces. 3,800 seats will be available in the grandstand at the Queen Victoria Memorial for public servants, which the Culture Secretary says is a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. This is GB News. More as it happens. Now, let's return to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Before we get stuck into the debates after 4 o'clock, going head-to-head this hour is GB News presenter and contributor Martin Daubeny and former editor of The Labelist Peter Edwards. Now, coming up in today's head-to-head, Boris Johnson claims that Mayor Sadiq Khan has misled the public about the ULEZ, saying that it has nothing to do with saving lives and everything to do with filling a black hole in transport finances. So should we scrap ULEZ? Then David Cameron has done a U-turn on his criticisms of cuts to foreign aid. But he's called for more private banks to invest in African nations to offer an alternative for poorer nations as Chinese influence sweeps developing countries. Should we do more to curb Chinese influence across Africa? Then, following the disruption of yesterday's 175th Grand National by animal rising protesters, which saw 3 horses put down, animal rights campaigners are calling for a ban to show jumping. But should horse racing be banned altogether? And Reform UK's leader Richard Tice has said that he wants to take inspiration from US Republican Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who's banned instruction on gender identity in primary schools. Tice has said that he wants a ban, but should we? That's coming up. Tell me more on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, so let's do this. Let's go head-to-head. Let's kick off with the first topic. Boris Johnson. Now, he is the latest to hit back at Sadiq Khan and the ULEZ plan by claiming that the scheme was designed to fill a gap in TfL's finances rather than be a low-emissions programme. Now, that comes after the Mayor's comments that his plan, that would see Londoners charged up to £12.50, will reduce air pollution in London, which is estimated to kill around about 400 of the capital's residents every year. Now, that's what the stats are saying, but let's welcome again to my panel. I'm joined by former editor of The Labelist, Peter Edwards. Also, smile, Peter, crikey. You're on camera.
Very serious topics.
You're on candid camera, mate.
Air pollution, very serious topic.
It is indeed. And, of course, GB News contributor and former Brexit Party MEP, Martin Daubeny. Right, I think on that, I'm going to start with Martin. Peter, do you mind? Martin, what do you think, then?
I think that the truth is finally emerging. ULEZ is the greatest pickpocket scheme in the history of modern politics. It's taxation dressed as salvation. It's saving the planet while crushing the working classes. Quite simply, the poorest motorists are most affected by this. They can't afford a Tesla. They can't afford a new car. They often live in the boroughs. There's a map in the Telegraph today showing that many of these boroughs are more than a mile from the nearest public transport link, so they are forced to drive. The air quality argument doesn't stack up either. The most polluted air is in the City of London. It has the least deaths by air pollution. The cleanest air is in Bromley, which has the most deaths per borough. And why is that? Because the oldest people live in those boroughs. They die with complications aligned to air pollution, in a bit like people who died with COVID also had underlying health conditions before. It's a con. It's a pickpocket scheme. Sadiq Khan, I think, is a highway robber. He makes Dick Turpin look like Mother Teresa. And I wish there was a protest at Trafalgar Square yesterday, which I covered on my show, and we gave it a fair hearing. The only channel to do so, GB News, gave those people a fair hearing. They're being smeared as far right, as crackpots, as conspiracy theorists. No, they're working class people who simply want to get to work without having all their money taken away by grasping politicians like Sadiq Khan.
Well, I would have pulled you up on Dick Turpin and all, but he did call the others far right and everything else if they disagreed with him, so I'm afraid it's fair's fair. What do you think, Peter?
Well, Martin had a lot of sound bites, and some of them were very lyrical, but I don't think it really stands up to scrutiny. So, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been a champion of ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone, for many years, and on the basis of that, he was re-elected. So there is a public appetite for it. Secondly, I'd point you to the Times investigation. The Times newspaper, by the way, is not very socialist. I think we can all agree on that. They ran, in the last few years, said on average, kids in London, in the inner city, grow up with lungs 10% smaller than other part of the country. And I'm sure that will horrify everyone, parent or not a parent. So we know air pollution is a problem. We know air pollution, very sadly, has started to appear on death certificates in the capital, and we know Sadiq Khan was elected to do something about it.
Well, Sadiq Khan wasn't elected to expand ULEZ. In fact, there was no public consultation on that whatsoever. And when people were consulted, they wholeheartedly rejected it. It's actually being challenged in court right now as we speak.
What would you do about air pollution in London?
Air pollution is already getting better in London, quite simply because cars are getting greener. And by the way, motorists have been priced off the road. Car ownership is on the decline in London for the first time. What would I do about it? I would encourage people to buy cleaner cars. I wouldn't punish them into it. Car's scrappage scheme encouraged people to take a Brompton bike. What use is that if you're a builder or a decorator? Where do you balance your ladder? On your head? I mean, seriously.
Look, I mean, and the other side of it is, if you're asking what would you do about it, I would actually work with fuel companies and create that clean, net zero carbon fuel, which is available. So I would push that, especially and try and encourage motorists to use that particular fuel. I wouldn't be charging... How come it's OK that you can come in for £12.50? It means that if you're rich, you can do it. If you're poor, you can't.
Let's zoom out for a minute and not be part political. When governments try to change behaviour, they tend to have a carrot, an incentive for people to change, and a stick through the taxation system. And we've seen that. Probably the biggest example in my lifetime is smoking, where the taxes, rightly, on cigarettes have gone up enormously. There's a lot more GP and NHS support to give up smoking because it's bad for the individual, but it's also bad for the public purse because of all the illnesses that require treatment on the NHS. So I've got no problem with the idea of having taxation to change a behaviour, but I absolutely accept for poorer folk in London. Martin cited a few industries that rely on a car. Another one is taxi drivers. It is going to be very tough, and I think we've got to take that seriously and not dismiss it. But I do believe there's an air quality crisis in London.
What about the people on the outside of the ULEZ? So for those people on the edge now, who will probably be around the Bromley area, who are quite healthy, now you've got all the cars going that way. What about them? I mean, I don't think you can't just move the air around like that. It doesn't stack up. It doesn't make sense.
Well, moving the air around, or moving the pollution around has been one of the criticisms of low traffic neighbourhoods. The idea that perhaps people on the North Circular get traffic rerouted to them. But Martin's point about Bromley, there are lots of different things that go into health outcomes, and we can't list them all now. Diet, education, quality of housing, and so on and so on. But Bromley, as I understand it, is a slightly more affluent area. There are other things why Bromley is a nice place to live that can affect health outcomes. We can't pin this all down on one thing like ULEZ.
We also can't pin deaths due to respiratory illness in Bromley on air pollution caused by cars. We just can't. In the same way, we can't put it down to any one factor. They have an older population who probably smoked more when they were younger because they're of that generation. If they succumb to a respiratory illness later in life, you can't say that's caused by air pollution alone. There is no science to back that up. And back to your thing about taxation, which is what this is about. Smoking, you're right. The rates have come down from like 20% to 14% in 5 years, but the tax revenue has stayed stable. 12 billion quid the Exchequer takes on tobacco tax. Sadiq Khan has seen the motorist as a cash cow he can forever milk dry to pay for his buckling, failing Transport for London. Motorists are being taxed to death to pay for public transport. He's giving away free school meals. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The free lunch is coming from taking money off motorists. He's taking from the poor and he's giving it to the rich. City Hall.
Martin, I think that's a bit of a stream of consciousness rant, taking everything. To go back to...
Prove me wrong on any of my points.
To go back to air quality, so there actually has been someone who's legally qualified, called a coroner, and I'm sure you know what the role of a coroner, who said air quality contributed to the death of a child. And
Contributes.
I didn't interrupt you. And that was included on the death certificate of a child. So, and that's a coroner, a legally qualified person.
But let's be honest as well. She did have asthma, and it did contribute. I would understand that bad air would contribute to that, and we all want good air, right? But the way to go about it surely isn't charging somebody £12.50, then making them go around somewhere else to give other people the bad air. If that really is the reasoning, it sounds to me like it's a money grab. Because if you can afford it, you can do it. So they don't really care.
Well, there seem to be two different objections. One is it the right way to change behaviour? I think it is. And then what should the Mayor of London do about the financial pressures on the capital, whether that's TfL or other things within his spending power? But to pick one of those, and we probably haven't got time to go into all now, it was a coalition government that scrapped the London Mayor's direct grant for TfL. And I'm afraid that the Tory mayor that agreed to scrapping the government grant was someone called Boris Johnson. And of course, now it's that same person called Boris Johnson who's now potentially in a swing seat fighting for his political life.
Yeah, but you've got to look at it. Yes, you're pointing out Tories, Liberal Democrats. What about Sadiq Khan? He's Labour, and he's doing something that most people object to. I mean, this is a democracy as far as I'm concerned, and if people don't really want to do it, and he's not really putting it out, and he's not listening, then that becomes something else, and he's not allowed to behave like that.
Well, that's why we have elections. You're absolutely right. Let's try and end on a note of consensus. There's an election. He won the last one, and he's standing again. So we'll soon find out. It is a democracy.
And you're right on that. I agree. On the democratic mandate, I think we need an anti-ULEZ candidate with proper political credibility and proper funding to stand against Sadiq Khan. And there are millions of motorists who will vote for that candidate. Bring it on.
Sounds like a volunteer.
I know a man who's well up for it, and I support him totally.
Who's that?
That'll come in time.
Really? Oh, come on time. Oh, I'm waiting for that. That's exciting. Well, let's see what you think on the story we're discussing. Peter and Martin have said their thoughts, but get your thoughts in as well. It's at GB News. You can tweet me there, or why not send me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. On GB News, we're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll be discussing how we should curb Chinese influence in developing nations like Africa. Stay tuned.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 20 minutes after 3 o'clock even. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, we've got another story, but keep your thoughts coming on ULEZ. We were discussing that and did we agree that it was a silly idea, Peter?
No, we agree on some things, but not on that one.
Not on that
we,
one.
we agreed that
Kind of
Sadiq
a
Khan
stupid
was putting himself up as a candidate based on his record.
Yeah, and I think,
democracy is good.
Yeah, well, hopefully they won't vote him in, but then that's down to the people. Let's see
The
what
Tories haven't even got a candidate, have they, at this stage?
You laugh, but, it's got to be better than Sadiq Khan. Sadiq can't. Right, let's see. Some of you have been sending in your messages. Let's see what you've been saying. Alan McNeely, lovely Alan McNeely. He's one of my great British voices. He says, a complete political rip-off. The changes made in towns and cities, because this is not just happening in London, by the way, have destroyed the ability to travel freely in the country. All drivers are being singled out to fund the madness of a few. Oh, yes, we've got one on the African nations as well, but we'll do that one later. Let's see, I've got Roy here. He says that the fact that lots of people have now given up smoking, more people have become obese.
Yeah.
There we go. That's to your point there. And then there's another one here from Mike. He says, I thought the idea was for the mayor in London to work in the interests of the city rather than an extreme environmental campaigner pursuing outcomes that London has rejected. So there we go. So that's the general consensus on that one. Keep your thoughts coming as well as ever. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right. Next up, David Cameron. Now, he's U-turned on his criticisms of the cuts to foreign aid. The former Prime Minister says that he's now a realist. Thank goodness for that. It didn't come a moment too soon when it comes to the issue, but he's called for global banks to invest more in developing countries. That is to curb China's influence. So joining me live is the former editor of the Labourist, Peter Edwards, and also GB News contributor and former Brexit MEP Martin Daubney. I'm going to start with you then, Peter. What do you think? China seem to be buying up swathes of Africa, and it looks like, and now I think the rest of the world are getting a bit jittery because Africa has a lot of resources.
Well, David Cameron raised aid spending when in his office, and I think he deserves credit for that, but I'm afraid he's something of a discredited figure now because of his business links and his time in office. I think it's right to flag a concern about China and also Russia basically investing in infrastructure or capital projects in part of Africa so they have an economic way in to what might be a developing or struggling economy, but then try and exert political influence as well. And we know, unfortunately, that the Russian leadership and the Chinese leadership, I'm not talking about the ordinary folk, but the governments don't always play by the rules of the West, particularly around engagement in foreign nations. So I think what China's doing is a source of great concern. I'm not sure David Cameron is the best advocate for this, because what he's really saying is that we need to work closer together with other countries. Well, he had all these bust-ups with the EU before the referendum, and he's saying that essentially global problems need global solutions. And that was exactly what was said by Gordon Brown, and that was correct. And David Cameron spent about 10 years rubbishing that point. So he's woken up to the idea now that global problems do require global solutions.
Well, he's sort of admitting that, though he's not denying that he's gone about, he's changed his mind. But didn't we do this anyway? I mean, didn't the British go in and take things from Africa and other countries and do exactly what the Chinese are doing? So I'm just wondering, it's slightly hypocritical, but what do you think, Martin?
Well, several points. First of all, I'm glad that Cameron's finally sort of smelt the coffee on the fact that charity should begin at home. The Conservative voters would love foreign aid to be cut and see more money spent domestically. It's madness that, for example, we're funding the Nigerian space project or sending money to India, the world's fastest growing economy. On the subject of China, they're waking up far too late to this. While the West was asleep at the wheel, China has been busy taking over nations with the resources it needs and liberal Westerners need. Cobalt in Congo, £6 billion worth of infrastructure. So they command the supply of the minerals we need for batteries, for iPhones, for computers. And everyone that complains about that also pays for it by buying devices. On to the issue of slavery. Isn't it funny how Western liberals obsess on the empire and the slavery of old, when right now young boys are digging cobalt out of the ground in Congo just to go into their iPhone or their new Tesla. Everyone that partakes in this funds modern slavery, and they're silent on that. They'd rather bang on about things 300 years ago in Britain while ignoring the problem right now. But as far as China's influence, that horse has bolted.
I found it interesting as well, because when I was reading the piece a while ago in The Guardian with Laura Trevelyan going back to talk about repatriations and giving money back to people from the countries that supposedly her family had taken money from and put slaves in, it just seems a bit ridiculous, really. when she probably sent the messages using her iPhone or whatever it was, and yet people seem to be ignoring that. Do you think that there's a bit of hypocrisy there?
I wouldn't. I think that was Laura Trevelyan, wasn't it?
That was
right?
Laura
Yeah,
Trevelyan,
yeah. I wouldn't single out her particularly.
No, but there's lots of them that do it. But she did do it, and she did write about it, so I'm pointing her out because she did.
But I believe she also wrote a cheque, so she's actually she and her family,
they gave 100 grand. But it's interesting that they should be bothering to do that and be pointing that out when right now, you know, we are all partaking in modern slavery by buying iPhones and all the, you know, the modern things that we're using right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've never bought an iPhone, but I completely accept we buy lots of things and we don't know about all the details of the supply chain. And I suspect, and I don't buy from Amazon, but if we looked into it, lots of other products we buy in more detail, we'd probably be horrified about where they all come from. I wouldn't be so dismissive of everyone's motivations as Martin would. You know, I'm on the left, but you know, when I was a student, I spent a lot of time reading things like slave narratives from the Caribbean, from America, and I found them fascinating and absolutely horrifying. So I don't do it out of a kind of London coffee-drinking, hand-drinking approach. I do it because some of the language in those narratives from the 18th and 19th century is seared on my memory. But let's talk about what we can do now. The word reparations I'm concerned about, again, because to anyone who's studied history, that sums up images of the end of the First World War, Germany, hyperinflation and all the terrible things that followed. So I probably wouldn't use the word reparations, but I do think it's right that Britain plays a role in essentially infrastructure investment where it's been guilty of very grievous wrongs in the last 200 or 300 years. But I think that's through partnerships. I don't think that's through writing a cheque particularly.
The trouble with reparations is, like, where will it end? I mean, do we ask for reparations from the ancient Romans? What about the Vikings? What about the Normans? I mean, they invaded. They took the lives of many working-class people and forced them into Scotland and Wales. Do we ask them, where does this stop? Reparations is madness because it's a cheque that's blank and never ends. We have to deal with slavery today, where it exists right now. But the Liberals don't want to tackle that because the fact of the matter is it shifts the narrative. The most enslaved people on the earth are in Africa and in China and in Korea, and it's not white people who are those slave owners. So therefore, there's a complete blind spot on the Liberal left side of the argument. It just doesn't fit the script of white man bad. And that's what's happening. It's being completely and utterly swept under the carpet while they sit around on their iPhones tweeting about being virtuous. iPhones that are funded by slavery. Now,
I think Martin's ranting away, and I don't know if that's directed as me as someone who I would describe myself as a Liberal, but you know, there are things we agree on, for example. So there's a real risk in a supply chain of things like iPhones today. There's a risk of hypocrisy for anyone on the left. And I've said I wouldn't use the word reparations, perhaps for some of the reasons that Martin has laid out. So I think perhaps Martin may have gone into this thinking we were going to be on opposite sides.
I'm not going to pop at you. I'm saying generally speaking.
OK, but I'm a Liberal. I'm on the left and I do lots of things that are part of that group. And just because someone is from a middle-class background and lives in a city in the West and maybe votes for a Liberal or left-leaning party doesn't automatically mean that they're hypocrites. I think what Martin's saying, and I do agree...
What are you saying? What are you saying?
Well, I think...
What are you saying? What are you saying?
Let's not talk about it as reparations. Let's actually do something about it. So that's not writing a cheque. That's actually investing in countries where there's been great wrong. But as Martin says, let's actually all show a lot more curiosity about where our products come from today. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny example. I'm just one person in the world. I don't buy from Amazon because I'm not comfortable with the level of taxation they pay. But I'm completely realistic that, you know, me spending 10 quid on a book in a British high street is not going to change the world.
OK, fair enough. But let's come back to David Cameron then. Is he being realistic in terms of cutting the foreign aid then? Because he's talking about cutting it. But it sounds like what he's really saying is let's transfer it. Instead of giving it to these countries, let's put it into sort of a big fund where we can then sort of all try and beat China.
Yeah.
And that's what he's saying, isn't he?
He's basically asking for private money buyouts. He's asking banks to loan money to China. So the way that China's been so successful in Africa, it's like saying, we will get the cobalt out of your ground because you haven't got the technology and we'll give you a share of the take. And it won't cost you anything. But meanwhile, we also soft take over your country without a single shot being fired. The Chinese empire has succeeded beyond the realms of possibility. Cameron wants the banks to offer that money to the African nations to take loans out against future earnings. I think it's for the birds. China are already there. These deals have been sealed.
I think briefly on that, Martin made an interesting point, privatisation. I would want assurance that David Cameron doesn't have any personal economic motivations in that. when he's arguing for a bigger role for private banks in state investment.
Yeah, but you don't want any of them to be involved in that. I mean, that seems to be the way where the cookie's crumbling. Well, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. We've got some more stuff on you, Les. Colin says Boris should stand for mayor again and kick Khan out. Actually, that is a point. I mean, would you vote for him if Boris went for mayor?
He'd win, yeah.
I'd actually vote for him. Actually, Sadiq Khan is ruining London. Yes, Boris, look, that's a good idea. Annie says if it was genuinely about air pollution, then nobody would have a problem. Car would be allowed inside the M25. It shouldn't be OK to drive into London in your polluting car just because you can afford to. Yeah, if they were genuine, but I don't think they are. Lee says in Greater Manchester, people are turning away from Labour because Andy Burnham is set on ULEZ. We do not want it. Andy Burnham, beware, because he's a sure winner. If he's going to go for that, then you may well lose, Andy. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue with our head-to-head. Following the disruption of the Grand National yesterday, the death of 3 horses at Aintree, I'm asking, should we ban horse racing? You'll hear the thoughts of my panellist, GB News contributor and former MEP Martin Daubney, and also former editor of The Labelist, Peter Edwards. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 3:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary's urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer to RCN members was fair and reasonable, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, though, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer. Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled because of concerns over safety, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The British Horse Racing Authority has robustly condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National as reckless. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA added it will be painstakingly analysing the race to determine what caused the deaths. More than 6,000 members of the armed forces will take part in the King's coronation next month, the largest military ceremonial operation in 70 years. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. TV, online, DAB, plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Stay tuned because at 4 o'clock it's my monologue and I'll be talking about smart motorways and how the Prime Minister has made the right decision. Then I'll be asking, should we ban horse jump racing as 3 horses died at the festival yesterday after Animal Rising caused disruption to the start of the race. Stay tuned.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Joining me today is, of course, Peter Edwards and, God, I've forgotten your name, Martin Daubney. Right, well, let's move on, because animal activists, animals rights activists, managed to briefly delay the start of the Grand National yesterday. They attempted to glue themselves to jumps to protest about the treatment of the horses. Now, this year, there were 3 horses that died, with the protesters pledging to end racing as a sport due to the high casualty rate. So should we ban horse racing? Let's see what Peter thinks of that. I'm going to start with you, Peter. Should we ban horse racing?
There's no public appetite for banning it. I think jump racing is cruel, and I care about animal rights, so I think animal rights protesters should always act within the law. But 3 horses killed over the Grand National week. I think if you had other sports festivals where you kind of count the dead of the participants afterwards, there'd be a greater sense of outrage. I find there's a lack of interest in the fact animals are being killed. And I'll draw you one other quick parallel. Do you remember Kurt Zuma, the footballer,
and he kicked the cat.
Who kicked a cat and very foolishly, well, it was foolish and unpleasant to do it, even more foolishly made a video about it, which was then leaked. There was outcry over that. So to kick one animal for fun is obviously very cruel and unpleasant, but this is a whole sport and sadly industry that is based on hitting horses repeatedly with a big stick. And of course I respect rural cultures, and of course I am mindful of all the jobs and economic activity that goes with it, but it is a sport based on hitting animals repeatedly until they do what you want.
Martin?
I agree with you. In fact, we shouldn't be banning things we don't like. The animal cruelty issue, I think, however, is a growing concern. We've seen in the past that the Grand National have attempted to make the course safer by losing some of the bigger water jumps, for example. And, you know, with the same sort of notion of gambling in football, I think that's been cut back yesterday. And I think that's been done because there's a sense of if we don't do something about it, then we'll be forced into it by the government. And I think with Aintree, I think they will try to make the course safer to appease critics. But then horse racing is a hugely important part of the rural economy. The gambling industry, like at Olympia, is a massive cash cow for the Treasury. 600 million people watch this worldwide. It's a multi-billion-pound event. We can't just go banning things we don't like. I also, of course, don't agree with the modus operandi of the protesters. It's like Extinction Rebellion for horse racing. It's reckless endangerment. And I was surprised, actually, that they weren't in danger from the punters. Can you imagine what the punters would think if all those lot went out there and stopped the race? I'm surprised that quite a few half-cut Irish guys didn't drag them off the course themselves. But I think they will they will have to bow to public pressure and I think do something about it. At the end of yesterday's race, it was very noticeable that they were pouring copious amounts of water over the horses. They were having a very public duty of care, and I think they need to show they really care about animal rights before something is done to stop them.
Yeah, it seems to me, it does actually seem slightly cruel. I don't really like to see animals being hit like that. I don't like the jumps. I mean, you know when you went to school, when you were at school and you did the hurdling race?
Yeah.
And I hated those hurdles, just in case you bash your knee, that really hurts. So imagine as a big animal taking these big jumps. I don't really know what the reasoning is as to why people think that this is not cruel to the animals.
Well, people
like... It is, isn't it? Surely it's cruel to the animals. I mean, I feel it is.
Well, I think it's cruel. I mean, it's not going to be banned, and I can't see a major political party, by which I mean Labour or Tories, pledging to ban it. So I think it's going to carry on for many years. But there's a parallel with the farming industry. And again, I have huge respect for agriculture, and I have friends who are farmers, but I haven't eaten meat for 20 years. And when some in the farming community say we have excellent animal standards, you know, organic feed and everything else, that's up to the point the animal is then killed for our pleasure and stuck in an oven.
Well, it's not really pleasure, it's to eat. I mean, if God didn't want us to eat them, then they'd be poisonous, surely, Peter.
I'm a churchgoer. I would not say that God has a view particularly on eating meat, and there are some cultures in the East that are very devout that don't eat meat at all. But it's not for me to give religious lessons, I don't think.
Yeah, nobody's saying we should eat the horses. We're not French.
Well, some people eat horses, and sometimes we eat them, we don't even know we're eating them.
We might do many things, but we're not French. But I think if we start stripping sports away because they're dangerous, then we'd have no boxing, we'd have no motorcycling, we'd have no Formula One, we'd have maybe no heading of the footballs. And I think that's the thing. It's like we've got to accept
but instead of danger is a part. It's cruel. Like, instead of danger, we're talking cruel.
It's also dangerous to the jockeys, but danger is a part of the enjoyment of sports. And unfortunately, we need to minimise the danger to animals and people, but I'm afraid it is a part of the equation, I think.
No, but what about cruelty, though? Because to me, that looks like sort of cruelty.
It is cruel when animals die. Of course it is. It's terrible when humans die.
The whipping of the horse, the really high jumps. You know, if they bash their legs and get lame, then they have to be put down. I mean, to me, it does seem a little bit cruel.
I get that. But I think that is an accepted part of the history of the sport. How can you get around that? I mean, you make a horse go faster.
Well, I have a quick final word on Martin's point. It's about consent, because a boxer and a jockey and a rugby player give their consent. But a horse, of course, cannot say, yes, I agree to take part in this race.
So what we need is speaking and talking horses. Right, we've sorted that one out. Well, let's see what you're saying, then, because a lot of people have been getting in touch, as ever. Your thoughts are always welcome. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can always tweet us at GBNews. Let's have a look at the GBNews inbox to see what exciting things that you've been saying with regard to horse racing. Richard says that, this is Sarah. Sarah says the horse racing pros say that the horses want to run in races, but if that's true, why do they need a whip? Let's ban the whip and see if they still run. That is a good point. I wonder if that would work. Let's see. Richard said jump racing is outdated and cruel. It is a sport run by the rich and funded by the poor punter. Eternity, great name, says, I think it should be banned. I hadn't really thought about it before until I saw the animal rights people defend the horses yesterday. I actually went out of my way, found their Facebook page and clicked the link to ban it, jump racing. I think the race is barbaric. Yeah, so a lot of people saying that they think it's barbaric, and actually that Animal Rebellion brought their attention to it, which is always interesting when that happens. And I'll do one more here. This is from Alison. It says, shame they don't stand up for COVID excess deaths. No offence to horses, but human lives more important. I don't know what that bit says. I'm going to stop there. I think you've taken me down a black hole or a hand grenade, either one. I don't fancy going. Then Maria says, Nana, why don't these idiots go protest outside a non-stunned slaughterhouse? Great show. Thank you very much, Maria. Like I said, that's a better one to end on. So joining me live, you've just tuned in. It's just coming up to 45 minutes after 3 o'clock. Reform UK, we'll move on now, because Reform UK leader Richard Tice has called for a ban on teaching gender issues in schools. Now, the suggestion takes inspiration from Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who banned such lessons, and it comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak ordered a review into sex education to ensure that lessons don't contain inappropriate or contested content. So let's see what the former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards, thinks of that, and GB News presenter and contributor Martin Daubeny. Martin, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I've done a lot of talking in schools. I made a documentary called Porn on the Brain for Channel 4 in 2013. I've spoken to about 45,000 British teenagers about the dangers of porn addiction, so I know what goes on in schools, and I've seen it change. I saw it change in my few years. Activists became embedded, outsiders, extracurricular lessons from pressure groups, from activist groups, were getting invited into schools and imbibing gender ideology into vulnerable, confused, hormonal teenagers. And lo and behold, we've seen an explosion in transgenderism in schools. It's something that's become fashionable. It's something that's contagious, in a sense. And in America, they rightly kind of call time on this. And that was driven by parent power, outraged parents going to Board of Governors meetings saying, stop teaching my child. There are 72 genders. There's a man, there's a woman. It's biology over ideology. And what we have now in Britain is a continuation of that, where education has turned into indoctrination. And parents often don't know what their children are being taught. And in Wales, for example, teenagers are allowed to transition without the parents even knowing.
Really?
Yeah, that is true.
Wales?
In Wales. And that could come to Britain. There's a transgender workshop kit, which is now in Brighton, being piloted with a view to a national rollout. And if parents don't wake up to this, this is going to be part of the curriculum. And I think we're going to see lots of confused and damaged young people who would have gone on to be perfectly happy gay people, who are going down the route of transition, hormones, maybe even surgery, and it's causing, I think, a mental health time bomb. And I totally agree, Richard Tice has got the right idea. This needs to be thrown out of British schools.
I think perhaps with this education, if they're going to do this, and I mean, I don't want to see it in schools, it should come out, I'm not happy with it, but if they are going to do this, then they should show the kids what happens if you do transition, the kind of medications that you'd have to carry on taking, because obviously you're going to be funding Big Pharma, and show you how your life would evolve if you're going to get involved in this. Because if you are going through the transition, I have met some very interesting people who have told me how they have been, their lives have been destroyed by all of this gender ideology. But Peter, your thoughts?
Well, it's often a very heated debate, and that's why I kind of want to try and speak in a reasonable way. So let's just start with some basics. So I'd say there will be some teenagers that are going to be trans. I think we can all agree on that. I think we can all agree on parental transparency. To me, the idea that a parent doesn't know that their child is identifying in a different gender is completely inappropriate. Schools have to be 100% transparent because it's literally a life-changing choice. And then thirdly, although we don't currently have this in the law, I'm actually quite concerned about medical treatments for people under the age of 18. I think when you're 18, it's totally different. You're independent. You can make your own decision. I think these are the things that perhaps at the forefront of my mind. And I wouldn't necessarily... I think Martin used the word indoctrinated. I haven't been in a secondary school for a hell of a long time, so I'm slightly uncomfortable with that word. I don't think there's indoctrination, but also I haven't made a documentary. I haven't been around talking to lots of schools. But I think you've got to allow parents the time and space to... talk to their children about basically the most difficult thing one could ever talk to them about. You know, it's far more complex than alcohol or anything else that you might have tough conversations with your kids about. But you've also got to allow children to be children, and then a small proportion that are questioning their gender need a supportive environment, but also a flexible environment. So that could mean a gender change, or it could mean no change.
But you know, well, listen, when I was young, I wanted to be a man. I used to try to get to lose standing up, not understanding why things weren't going to work out for me, because I have an elder brother, so I was called a tomboy, and I got over it. I went through that, well, you know, but I got over it. Now, if I'd had people talking to me about, well, maybe you are a boy, maybe you want this, maybe... I don't know whether I would not have been persuaded. And I think I may well have found myself in the trans category, because I'd be thinking, well, maybe I am.
Yeah, and people's behaviours are very important. For example, you know, you get sort of very masculine women. You get, you know, quite sort of butch women who may go on to be perfectly happy, wonderful lesbians. You get very effeminate men who go on to be wonderfully happy gay men.
Or straight, either way.
Straight men. Yeah, precisely. But the fact of the matter is, if they are being identified by activists within schools, and, well, you could be the wrong gender. And there's a huge crossover as well with autism, with ADHD, with Asperger's. There's a massive crossover. It's a very complex issue. Planting ideas of being special, being unique, being rewarded, being cosseted, because that's what happens in schools. I know it. My boy's going through this at school. In my son's birthing group 13 years ago, Now, every single one, when I meet those parents now, every single one of those parents has got a transgender child in their children's classroom. Now, you could say that we're allowing them to come out, or you could also say we're planting an ideology and it's catching and it's spreading. I'm in the camp that it's the latter.
Well, listen, we've got a couple of messages in for you. And Miranda James, she says that Martin Dorby is absolutely right. It's totally outrageous what's taking place in schools, and this includes CRT, critical race theory. I'm with you on that. That is a nonsense. That sends children home telling their parents that they are racist. No matter the protest a parent makes, nope, the child says you're racist because you're white. It's all very sinister and deeply worrying. Please ask Martin to continue his work. She says, carry on, please doing what you're doing. Absolutely. And what's David saying? No, I didn't know that. He's asking me something about the revival of something in the Beatles. We're not talking about that. What are you talking about, David? David? Anyway, sorry, no. So what do you think? I wanted to ask your thoughts then on the drag queen story hours, those things, because those are also seeping into sort of the education system, which I don't quite understand why, but what's your view on those?
Yeah, as I understand it, drag queens have gone into secondary schools, is that right?
Story hour, yes, to tell stories.
Well, I'm not sure there's anything inherently wrong with that. I mean, if you go to a pantomime, as kids do, then that involves, and historically, lots of men dressing up as women. And, you know, a drag queen is not automatically giving a play or a poem that has sexual content. They can be talking about all sorts of things, just like in a pantomime, a man dresses a woman and talks about all sorts of things that have no sexual content at all. So, all these things get caught up in a culture war, and my view is that we've got to try and find consensus where we can.
But I can't see the point of that, though. I don't understand why a man dressed in drag, should be talking to children. I don't think there's a place in that in school. And some of them who were going actually had illicit content on their social media, which that's right. If I was going to a school, which I used to go to lecturing schools, I have a DBS check. If I had those things on my social media, I know I probably wouldn't be allowed to do that.
I would say that's a separate issue, though. Because...
No, but some of the drag queens who were doing this had that kind of content, and they were going into schools, Martin.
I think it's quite simply, I've got no problem with drag queens. I've seen them in New York, in Sydney, in London, fantastic. I also quite like going to strip clubs every now and then.
Do you know?
Right, listen, and those are appropriate for over 18s. And who would invite, who thinks it's a good idea to get drag queens into a school would invite lap dancers into a school? They wouldn't, because it's an adult thing that belongs in an adult space. It's not about being homophobic, it's not about being transphobic, it's about saying let children be children. And that's the point. And it's not just always the same as pantomime. There are videos going of drag queen events in pubs. As one of the Honour Oak, I attended the protest of that. And it's blokes in fishnet stockings with their bits out. And I'm afraid it crosses the Rubicon of what's acceptable. And I have a problem with, I think it's a form of grooming. It's grooming young minds into adult lifestyles too soon. That's what it is.
And it's interesting, Peter, because Ian Mould has sent a message in saying, can you ask Peter why it's never women dressing up as men going into school?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's
he just told me to ask you.
A question for me, but
he asked me to ask you. I don't know why he's asked you to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I'm asking you anyway.
Sorry, my knowledge of drag queens going into schools is pretty much zero. Let's go back to the pantomime. Something I do know about. There's cross-dressing both ways in a pantomime.
That's different. You're paying to go to a pantomime. You've chosen to do it. If the kids are in school, you may not know that this is happening, and this is the problem with all this indoctrination within the schools. And I agree with the word that you're using, especially when we're not being told about what's going on. I'm a parent. You're a parent,
yeah,
and you're a parent.
Yeah. That's why we all agree on transparency. Yeah. Whatever goes on in schools.
I just think that there's this blurring of the boundaries, and it's back to the gender ideology. It's like, here are alternative lifestyles which are perfectly healthy, great. But why do 4-year-olds need to know about drag queens? Why do 4-year-olds need to be taught about masturbation? Because that's what's happening. It's in there in the curriculums, and it's being shrouded in secrecy. If parents ask, they're often kept at arm's length. This is happening, and parents have a right to know what's going on. I can see you frowning about my comment about the masturbation. It's happening in Wales. It's part of the curriculum. Look at the stuff that's going on in Scotland. I know friends of mine, 12-year-old girls coming home from school traumatised because they're being told about extreme sexual acts, which they now think is something that's expected of them. We're damaging young minds by exposing them to too much too soon. That's what I think.
I totally agree with that. Do you think you've got about 10 seconds?
Well, clearly, no form of sexual entertainment should be provided to a child in school. I think we can all agree on that. And I wasn't frowning, but I was baffled, really, that sexual acts would be taught to children.
Well, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying about jump horse racing. Sarah says the horse racing professionals say that horses want to run in races, but do they need a whip? Let's ban the whip and see if they still run. I think we've read that one. Rich says jump racing is outdated and cruel. It's a sport run by Rich. Read that one as well. Tracy said a horse that doesn't want to run doesn't run. The animals' rights people cause the death of the horses because the horses were disrupted and left hyper-irritated by the delay. Well, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Thank you very much to Peter Edwards. You'll be joining me later on for the rest of the show, and also Martin Dorby. Thank you so much. Well, pleasure. Martin will be joining us for the next hour too. And thank you to you for your company. Stay tuned. I've got my monologue on the way next. Don't go anywhere.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are. We don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital. Radio, it's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Now, we've got loads going on for the next few hours. Me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offered to RCN members was fair and reasonable, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay rise.
Our members neither think it's reasonable or fair. It's a short-term approach that plugs a gap by giving them a one-off, what they've described as a bonus. That's certainly not going to address the fundamental crisis that we've got within our nursing profession or within the NHS.
Labour has vowed to end what it describes as a postcode lottery for GP appointments if it wins the next election. The party says up to 3/4 of patients in some parts of England aren't able to see their doctor of choice, and only half the number of appointments are held face-to-face. Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained every year to 15,000, and Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says young people need more opportunities to enter the profession.
Unless the NHS has the staff it needs, it's going to struggle to treat patients on time. And we're going to end up in this bizarre situation where on one hand we're turning away straight A-grade students from studying medicine at university, whilst recruiting people from overseas in greater numbers than we're training our own homegrown staff, which is not fair to other countries around the world. But even more importantly, it's not fair to bright teenagers in Britain who could be promising doctors and medics of the future who are being denied the opportunity.
Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled over safety concerns, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. Conservative Party Chairman Greg Hands told Camilla Tominey the government's putting public safety first.
It's been right for us to, as I say, look at the evidence, to come about it with bearing in mind all the factors that are involved, and that's why we've taken the decision as a result of the public concern to cease new smart motorways. That's what I think is the right decision.
The British Horse Racing Authority has robustly condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National as reckless. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it'll be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. Global leaders are holding crisis talks in an effort to bring an end to the second day of heavy fighting in Sudan. At least 56 civilians have been killed and almost 600 injured as the army and paramilitary forces battle for control across the capital, Khartoum. Both sides claim to have taken the airport, presidential palace and state TV. Tensions have escalated as political factions negotiate over a proposed transition to civilian rule following a military coup in 2021. And more than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Round of applause for Rishi Sunak. Well done, Rishi, for being bold enough to scrap the rollout of 14 new smart motorways. Here's Greg Hans speaking to Camilla Tominey earlier.
It's been right for us to, as I say, look at the evidence, to come about it with bearing in mind all the factors that are involved, and that's why we've taken the decision, as a result of the public concern, to cease new smart motorways. That's what I think is the right decision.
Thank God the 18-year experiment on British motorways has finally come to an end. Although it was pretty obvious to all of us that they were a stupid and dangerous idea. I mean, it beggars belief that some idiot came up with them in the first place. It's a sort of Baldrick from Blackadder moment. I have a cunning plan, my lord. Let's turn the hard shoulder into an actual moving lane. In their place, we can put little lay-bys every mile and a half or so, a bit like an A road, but on a motorway where we have 3 to 5 lanes of moving traffic. If someone breaks down, we can monitor this with cameras on the overhead gantries and a radar system. People in monitoring centres will respond to the incidents by closing the lanes with little red X's overhead. Brilliant idea. It will cost us a lot less. Really? Well, that depends on what you determine as cost, life or money. We were fed stupid government adverts of ridiculous bumblebee telling us what to do if we broke down on one.
You need to go left. Go left. Indicators on.
And after going left, the car pulls into a clearly marked, extremely spacious lay-by. Oh, how perfect the world is. Only it isn't, is it? As many of us have found out. What if you break down and there is no lay-by nearby, and you get left, and you go left, and then you have to squeeze into whatever space is available? Or worse, if you break down towing a caravan and get into difficulties. For the benefit of those on the radio, a car towing a caravan has done just that. There was no lay-by in sight. A car then smashes into the caravan's right side. And if you missed that, go to gbnews.com. You can download the free GB News app and you can watch it again on catch-up. Alternatively, and this is the one, if you can't make it to a lay-by, you're told to stay in your vehicle until the road is closed. Right, yeah, and fight every bone in your body that tells you to get the hell out of the way from the oncoming traffic immediately. You see, back in the real world, the more things you put in the way of getting to the solution, the more opportunities there will be for things to go wrong. Like, what if you break down suddenly and your car can't make it all the way to the nearest lay-by because they are further away than promised? What if the cameras don't spot you because the person monitoring them is on a fag break or the system is down? What if there is no radar technology, as we learnt was the case on many of these things? Or if the people behind you don't see the red X above the lane or ignore it? Well, there are so many variables. I could go on forever. Whilst it is welcome news that there will no longer be more of these awful, ridiculous damn things being built, what I want, and looking at it for the existing ones, I want those to go. I mean, it's awful because they promised that they would increase the frequency of the lay-bys with the existing ones. That's what they said they'll do. But you tell that to the families who say that the government have blood on their hands. I want them to go further. I say reinstate all hard shoulders on all the existing smart motorways. Right, Danny loved that. He said, I was so stern. I think he liked that, Danny. Oh. Right, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tricks going to cost them their lead following their targeted campaigns where they claimed Rishi Sunak doesn't want to lock up sex offenders? Labour's days of commanding 20-point leads in the polls have pretty much disappeared as millions of undecided voters are more likely to back Sunak over Starmer, and recent polling indicates that the prospects of a hung parliament are much higher. So have their attack ads spectacularly backfired? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. Paul Duddridge will be joining me to bring us up to date with the news and the drama from the US. Of course, Trump Watch, we'll find out what's going on there. Then at 5, it's this week's Outside. Now, this reality TV star has been known for her antics on Big Brother and has been campaigning to get the Kohinoor diamond back into India. So can you guess who it is? I bet you got it straight away. Why did we give them that clue? That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, so let's welcome again to my panel. But before I do that, I'll do the spokesperson of the Smart Motorway once we've discussed it. Right, so bring me back to my panel. Danny Kelly and also Christine Hamilton. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Right, so I'm going to start with you, Danny, because you're a car man.
Yeah. Smart motorways, I like them. I think...
What?
Well, I like them because it means that the traffic flows better. Now, unfortunately...
More car smashes and more people need to buy more cars.
No, not purely out
That's
of
why.
basic capitalism.
Suddenly I realised.
No, if operated correctly and if there wasn't human error, and of course we're all guilty of human error, what we saw on the television earlier was a flatbed lorry having to avoid at the last minute when he, or she, I'm guessing it was a bloke, when he saw a caravan that had broken down. Now, really, the flatbed lorry, not the fatbed lorry, the flatbed.
I never said anything.
It's just looking at you. Actually, yes, the size of the... OK, so anyway, the lorry driver wasn't paying attention, so that's why at the last minute he smashed into the caravan. That's human error. Now, you have to...
Yes, but the caravan had nowhere to go. That's the point. Yes,
caravan shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, but the caravan broke down, so it didn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
So the caravan pulls in because there's nowhere to pull in.
I get that.
Because obviously it's broken down.
No, I understand that completely.
So now you're saying human error. Yes, but the caravan had nowhere to go.
No, I know, but it was human error from the lorry driver because he should have seen the caravan that had stopped in front of him.
If he'd gone into another lane, there may well have been a car on the other side, which would have hurt somebody else.
Well, he should have slowed down. He should have slowed... Look,
yeah, but
we're getting into technicalities.
Okay, let's
go on.
If the caravan had been able to pull over onto a proper hard shoulder...
I understand that.
It wouldn't have
I understand that. And you could argue, would the caravan be big enough or small enough to get into these little sort of hard shoulder sanctuaries?
It would have been...
Well, not if there was another car there. I'm arguing against myself now.
No.
I can't believe you're in favour of them. I can't think there's a
Oh, no, I'm not
person
talking
in their
nonsense, no.
who is in favour of smart motorways.
Well, lots of people who drive many thousands of miles a year, I think, are in favour of smart motorways. Now, I know you don't do a great deal. I've driven down, knowing that we were talking about the subject. I know, but driving down, I've done 100 miles to get here from the Midlands, and I deliberately counted the cars that had broken down. And on the M40 South, there was 4, and on the M40 North, there was 4. And this, again, is an argument against myself here.
It is.
You must have been going, oh, there's another one.
What I want, I didn't want any, so I could defeat you all. I say, well, I didn't see one broken down car today. So if it's managed correctly, look, if it's managed correctly, you get the red crosses.
It's not going to be managed. The problem is they had this Dynax system, this software that kept failing. So the people who, although it wasn't really the software's fault, they called it Die Now. A lot of the people who were working in those spaces, all those call centres or whatever they are, to sort of deal with the cameras and the gantries and everything. But it wasn't actually the software's fault, but they named it that, and they were very traumatised by the fact that they knew that people were dying because, frankly, they couldn't handle the fact that the software wasn't operating.
I think they are appalling things, and this was a cheapskate option. Because they didn't want to spend the money on widening motorways, this was the cheapskate option. Goodness knows what's going on in the mind of the civil servant who dreamt this up. Cheap for the government, but it's adding incalculable costs. 70 people have lost their lives because of these things. And as you said, Nana, they're not rolling out anymore, but they are going to continue on the M56 and the M6. They are 3/4 of the way completed, so they're going to continue those. They're stopping other new ones because they're not safe, but they're going to continue those, which I find is extraordinary. In their defence, they're going to create 150 of these emergency areas. But it's absolute lunacy, and people have paid so dearly with their lives for this.
But there's always a balance. Governments need to always think about a balance between potential accidents and also the practicalities of just getting on with your day-to-day life. That's why, for example, the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in towns and cities, if the government wanted to really reduce the level of accidents and deaths, then they'd reduce it to 15. But they understand that that is too slow. So that was a decision made by the government. Yes, potentially there could be more accidents, but what does that mean to the day-to-day life of businesses and tens and hundreds of thousands of cars?
I understand it's a compromise between cost and safety. I mean,
Yes.
You know, you get one accident on an unmanned level crossing because some idiot goes through, and then they say, right, we must close all these unmanned level crossings. That would be ludicrous. But I think 70 is quite a high number of people.
Yeah.
But who knows how many people would have died if they hadn't had the closing of
but it's
the
not just that,
hard
though, is it?
lane.
It's not
It could
just
have
that.
been-
It's not just that. The way these accidents are occurring are accidents that are literally occurring because of the situation that the people are in. So people will sensibly pull over as they're meant to. But unfortunately, because the crosses haven't been set up or whatever it is, or somebody's having a fag break, or, you know, who's operating the thing, or just something isn't working, it means that these things are causing death. And it's all these procedures in between the communication chain that are actually causing the real...
I don't think anyone would leave it unmanned whilst they're having a ciggy break.
No, I think that's a bit...
No, you don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know that.
They should be sacked if they do.
No, you don't know that. But somebody could be... What I mean, though, that is they could have turned their head and not seen it. Because why? Well, I'll tell you what, let's speak to somebody who knows a lot about this, because joining me now is spokesperson at the Smart Motorways Kill campaign, Claire Mercer, whose husband died in a crash on the M1. Claire, it's so good to see you again. I mean, this is sort of bittersweet, the fact that the government have finally listened. How are you feeling about all of this?
It's a bit of a win, but it's only half the battle, and it's still the important half of the battle to go, because it's the current ones that are killing us.
Well, exactly. That was my take on it. Now, for those of us who don't know, and I mean, Claire, if you are able to tell us what happened to your partner, just so people understand the awfulness of these ridiculous things, and I don't know why they're going to carry on with these ones.
He had a minor collision on the M1 near Meadowhall in Sheffield. It should have just been a bad start to the day. Drivers should have both been on their way within a few minutes. But because they were at a sign that said no hard shoulder for 4 miles, because 4 years ago we knew less about smart motorways than we know now, they didn't know what they were meant to do. They didn't know that there was a refuge area a mile out of sight. And you can see on CCTV that they travel further onwards looking for a safer place to stop, but they can't find one, and it's your legal obligation to stop after an accident. So they pull over as far left as they can, but they can't get their vehicles right out of the live running lane because of the crash barrier, and they themselves can't get over the crash barrier because there's a 30-foot drop on the other side. They get out their vehicles and they talk to each other there, and this is what happens in 90% of these cases on live running lanes. The people are out of their vehicles, and HGVs cannot manoeuvre the same as a Ford Fiesta. You know, they've got much bigger stopping distances and things. And a HGV ploughed into them bodily and caused absolute carnage across 4 lanes of the motorway. And even when there was absolute carnage across 4 lanes of the motorway, the technology that we're led to believe will save our life didn't pick them up even then.
Well, you see, that's in response to what Danny was saying. The point is that whilst they have all this technology, once you've got a chain of communication, then anything, any loose link on that chain means that message won't get across. So you've been campaigning. Yeah. What's the next step now? Because we've got to the point now where they're stopping the rollout. I don't know why they didn't do it sooner, but we still have to live with these things, the ones that they've currently got. How can we, what's going on in terms of, you must be relieved, but doesn't feel like this is over yet.
Well, the campaign doesn't stop because, like I say, it's the existing ones that are killing us. So unfortunately, we've still got a job to do, and we're not going to stop until we've got the hard shoulder back on every single motorway. Because again, it's just smoke and mirrors and caveats and footnotes, because they say all new smoke motorways, and then they admit that the M56 and the M6 are still going to open without hard shoulders. The section's currently being worked on there. And you say about the weak links, all the way through its weak links, like the technology you've mentioned, this DINAC, it is not up for the job. There is nowhere near enough staff employed in the control centres. In inquest after inquest after inquest that I've sat through, National Highways have said we've got 100% coverage, camera coverage on the motorways, but when pressed, they eventually admit, although they've got 100% camera coverage, so there's cameras covering 100% of the motorway network, there is not enough camera operators employed to watch them. So the cameras are looking, but there's no one watching. And this is the same everywhere. So you've just got weak link after weak link after weak link. And the technology that's meant to be installed in the roads is either not installed, as in my husband's case, or it didn't work. And time after time, it's just not picking it up. The gantries do their own thing. They set their own signs, or they don't set the signs. It's just weak link after weak link after weak link, and people's lives are depending on this. And the other argument that a lot of these accidents are down to human error. We're human. You can't take the human out of this. We are human, and we had an infallible thing at the side of the road that didn't rely on glitchy technology, didn't rely on humans, and it worked, and we chose to take it away. And that is just inconceivable. And yet, when I push for corporate manslaughter charges, I'm told that National Highways do not owe the motorist a duty of care, so therefore cannot be prosecuted for corporate manslaughter.
Well, listen, Claire, it's always good to talk to you. You fight a good fight, and I'm behind you 100%. I think you're spot on, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining me. That is Claire Mercer. She lost her husband on a smart motorway. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tactics going to cost them their lead? That's next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's time, though, for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tactics going to cost them their lead? Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been facing criticism for attack ads, claiming that Rishi Sunak and the Tories are soft on crime and sexual abuse. Now, posters accusing Rishi of not supporting prison sentences for paedophiles, as well as deliberately hiking taxes on working people, were uploaded by the Labour Party to its social media pages in what many cite as a classic example of negative campaigning and dirty political tactics. Sir Keir Starmer says that he regrets nothing, but if polling begins to be affecting Labour's consistent 20-point lead, then what do you think? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tactics going to cost them their lead? Well, joining me now is GB News contributor and former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney, former Labour List editor Peter Edwards, and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Right, so let's see what your thoughts are. Well, let's go to the people that are here then. They've gone. Where's the boxes? I like little boxes. Right, well, I'll start. Might as well go to one of you then. I'll start with you, Martin.
Yeah, I do think it's impacting negatively upon the Labour Party. There was a poll out yesterday in the Times which is showing a surprise bounce for Rishi Sunak. And I think that's partly as consequence to do with the fact that we're used to politics being relatively polite in Britain. These adverts came in because the Labour Party took advice from Joe Biden's campaign, Democrats in America, which politics much dirtier over there, attack videos, below the belt, part of their political currency, and also in Australia where they do the same. But Britain isn't quite like that. I think the old adage, when you start playing the man and not the ball, you've lost the match. Starmer always said the Labour Party were the be kind party. They would keep politics out of the gutter. I'm afraid they've descended into the gutter with this, and I hope it does backfire, because I'm no fan of Rishi Sunak, but the one thing he is, he's a decent man. He cares about the country, and the ads were false. Of course he doesn't want to keep paedophiles out of jail. The ads were revolting, and they deserve to backfire.
Peter Edwards.
I'm not sure they've backfired. Labour has still got a double-digit poll lead, and I think there's a completely legitimate criticism of Tories, especially cutting funding on the Ministry of Justice down by about 25% over 9 years. But I wouldn't have chosen these words. I think the personal attacks, whether it's the one we're talking about, or remember Sir Michael Fallon, Ed Miliband, quote unquote, he stabbed his brother in the back, David Miliband. He'd stabbed Britain in the back as well. I don't think these things are good for politics, and they turn people off voting. We want more people to be involved. We want more people to engage in the democratic process. So I think the personal stuff, it doesn't get work. I think the Tories have been disastrous for the criminal justice system, and austerity's had a terrible impact, particularly on victims, which many of us might be, or we might know people who've been victims in the criminal justice system. But I think there's a different way to land the point.
Stephen Pound.
Good afternoon, Nana. Look, I'm not unhappy about this. I feel awkward about this. I spoke to some people in the Labour Party this week who said to us, look, it is working. 21 million people viewed this in the week, and we have got these two issues, about crime and sentencing and non-dom status into the public domain. But look, as far as I'm concerned, the minute that Boris Johnson tried to link Keir Starmer with Jimmy Savile, we actually dived into the gutter. And I just think it's a bloody shame if the Labour Party chooses to dive in after it. Look, the question is, what they're saying to me in the Labour Party now is go hard or go home. And this is what politics is like nowadays. If the Labour Party did as I hope they would, say, look, let's have a non-aggression pact. Let's actually do this the decent way. Let's, as has just been said, play the ball and not the man. Who's to say that the other party wouldn't do it? The problem is that we've crossed the bar. We've actually broken through that barrier, and we're in a very, very dirty area. I don't like it, but your question was quite simply, is it working? Well, actually, believe it or not, it is working. People are talking about this, and Labour have still got a very, very healthy lead in the polls. But when I raised this last week, I was told that I was being squeamish. Well, squeamish I am, but very uncomfortable I am as well.
But people aren't saying good things about the Labour Party as a result of it. This is the problem. Not all publicity is good publicity. It is just publicity. Whilst we are all aware of it, why did Sir Keir Starmer have to do that? Why couldn't he have just spoken about the policies? Because the criticism of Sir Keir Starmer is that we don't know what they're about. So it's all very well saying, come and vote with me, come and vote for me. But without telling us what we're voting for, it's very difficult for people to decide that they would definitely go that way. And this is really Sir Keir Starmer's to lose, because if he's that far ahead, why should he resort to these tactics? I mean, Martin, you're nodding your head, you're agreeing with me.
Yeah, that's right. And also the additional problem that Starmer now faces is at the moment he starts criticising his opponent, then his own record comes under intense scrutiny. Let's talk about paedophiles. The grooming gang scandal happened on many Labour Council watchers. Thousands of working-class white girls were systematically raped, and it was turned a blind eye. That was on a Labour watch, not Starmer's watch, but it's a Labour Party issue. The Savile issue, that's being talked about today in the Mail on Sunday. Starmer was in charge back in those days, and so he will face scrutiny on that. On violent crime, London has the worst record of violent crime in the nation. That's a Labour mayoral watch. And so the problem is, when you start getting specific, you cannot throw stones if you live in a greenhouse. That's going to bite Starmer, I think, on the bum.
Peter, I mean,
well, that's a little bit stream of conscious. I mean, when Keir Starmer was director of the Crown Prosecution Service, the conviction rate for serious sexual offences went up. Of course, there are lots of issues in London. I'm particularly concerned about knife crime and gun crime in London. But we have to talk about why that's happening. So, for example, the number of police stations that have been closed, or exhaustion among police and insufficient funding of the police, and so on and so on. You know, I don't think it's appropriate or realistic to lay everything at the feet of the London mayor, because the money comes from central government, particularly the money for police officers.
But Starmer's blaming Sunak, so why can't we blame who's in charge of its Labour watch? That's the point. When you get personal, then I'm afraid that becomes the currency of political interaction. It gets dirty, and it won't get better. You know, Labour are always the party who said, let's be kind, let's be moderate, let's be nice. That's completely been thrown in the bin by this campaign.
Well, I think we all agree it's unwise to personalise it, but on your particular point, the funding for police comes from central government, not from the London mayor.
Yeah, but how you spend that money and the way you behave is down to you. Stephen Pound.
I have to say, I never ever said let's be moderate, let's be nice. That was not the way I ever did politics. But look, I worked with Keir Starmer in the north of Ireland, and I have to say he had one of the hardest jobs anywhere in the United Kingdom, being a prosecutor in Northern Ireland, and he did it brilliantly. He was a man I have utmost considerable respect for. But look, I have to say, on these other issues about, you know, sort of dragging it down into the gutter, you know, I'm sorry, I don't like it, but on the other hand, people are going to do it. There's no question about that. There's absolutely no question. It's going to happen. So I would much rather be occupying the moral high ground. I mean, you know, people used to say when you rang Tony Blair on the phone, he said, you know, leave your message after the high moral tone. I mean, you know, we've been there. We've tried it. And the real difficulty is there's too many people will actually drag us down into the gut. But look, you say about, you know, we should be talking about our policies. More people are talking at the moment today about these policies than would have been had it not been for these dreadful adverts that have gone out. So it doesn't matter.
More people are
working.
Yes, but if you balance it about, more people are talking about the adverts and talking about the policies. You know why? Because we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to hear. We want to hear what their policies
We've got
are.
policies coming out of our ears.
But what are they?
Policies you can shake a stick at.
Well, let's Peter, give us 3 policies of Labour that they've recently come up with.
Well, great policy.
No. Ask Peter. It's Peter's turn. Peter.
I've been doing childcare all week, so I haven't been reading a paper.
Did you want me or
I'll give you one.
No, I said 3.
I'll give you one particular example that you raise on this channel a lot. You know, small boats crisis, cut the backlog, greater cooperation with France, and a new force that goes across the Home Office and the police.
Yeah, great.
New regulator for the energy
that's 3 in 1.
companies. Actually bring the utilities back into public ownership. Get rid of the House of Lords.
Wow. This old hat, that's the problem. We don't know anything new about Labour. But I've got to say thank you very much to Martin Daubney, Peter Edwards and also Stephen Pound. Thank you so much. Well, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews. It's fast approaching 33 minutes after 4 o'clock. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking if Labour's dirty tricks, tactics are costing them their lead. You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christian Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 4:33. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer to RCN members was fair and reasonable, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay rise. Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled because of concerns over safety, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The British Horse Racing Authority has robustly condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National as reckless. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it will be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. And more than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month. That's the largest military ceremonial operation in 70 years. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's just coming up to 35 minutes after 4 o'clock. There's still loads more to come, including my special mystery guest in Outside at 5. Now, she is a reality TV star. She's been known for her antics on Big Brother and isn't afraid to give her opinion. Can you guess who she is? We'll also be continuing with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tricks going to cost them their lead? The party's been under fire for attack ads on social media, claiming that Rishi Sunak doesn't want to lock up sex offenders, and now Labour's commanding leads in the polls are pretty much disappearing. We'll be discussing that next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, where have you been? It's OK. It's fine. We've still got quite a lot to come. This is GB News. We're on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We return to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, are Labour's dirty tactics going to cost them their lead? So Keir Starmer has been facing criticism for the ads on social media, the one that claimed that Rishi Sunak and the Tories are soft on crime and sexual abuse. The Labour leader says that he regrets nothing, but the issue seems to be denting the party's consistent or 20-point lead. So that's why I'm asking you this question. Do you think that the Labour Party's tactics are actually going to cost them that? Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me now is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Christine,
well, it seems to be having... To me, those... I mean, I thought they were horrendous, especially when they started attacking Rishi Sunak's wife. I thought that was below the belt. Several things I think are going to dent their lead. First of all, I'm not a massive fan of Rishi Sunak, but he comes over, he is transparently decent person. And I think people are beginning to realise that. And if he can stop the boats, of course, if he can get inflation down and people begin to feel more comfortable in their wallets, it's the economy stupid. But no, I think those ads do backfire, and I'm glad to see Labour's... It was bound to dent a bit. I mean, that ridiculous lead they had a while ago couldn't last. And people are now beginning to examine Labour's policies, whereas previously all Labour had to do was sort of keep quiet, keep their more controversial people under control, keep the lid on them, which they managed to do. For example, they put Corbyn back into his box. But now they really are beginning to focus. And, I mean, Corbyn is so massively lacklustre and boring. He's never going to...
Do you mean Starmer?
Starmer, I'm so sorry, Starmer. He's never... Well, Rishi Sunak isn't exactly a rabble-rouser, is he? I mean, it's difficult to choose between them. Neither of them is terribly inspiring. But I think... And I don't... By the way, you were talking earlier about them attacking Starmer for the Savile thing. He was in charge when Savile was overlooked. It's awful. And nobody is saying that he knew what was happening and did nothing, but he must have known quite a lot was going on. And I think he does bear some responsibility for that.
Well, you can't... claim that other people bear responsibility when they're overseeing something, but not actually.
But not him. No, exactly.
But then not you. So it's either one way or the other. And if he's going to do these tactics, then he's got to accept it or come back at him. Danny.
Yeah, the signature really did it for me. I thought that was really spiteful. Rishi Sunak's signature, like he's signing off that 4,500 perverted paedophiles dodge prison. You see, that's the real kicker for me. And if Keir Starmer... If he's trying to win swing voters over, I think he's going about it the wrong way. Now, hardcore Labour, they hate the Tories. You know, he can put whatever he wants on an A4 pamphlet. They'll still vote Labour because they despise, pathologically, anything to do with conservatism. But if you are a swing voter, and if it's a toss of a coin between Labour and Conservative, and if you're a decent human being, you will know that that's been snidey. That has been nasty.
I mean, like, you know, as if Rishi Sunak, he's got daughters, as if he would not want to lock up child sex offenders. We all want to lock them up. It's like the most nonsense thing that you can say, especially given his own record as the head.
It's as ridiculous to me as Budweiser using Dylan Mulvaney. I mean, that has really backfired in their face, and they've lost zillions of pounds as a result. So let's hope the same will happen.
But don't forget, Labour...
The floating voter will hate that sort of
Of course they will.
And they're the ones that they've both got to win over.
But don't forget, Labour tend to be on the side of treating people fairly and being the...
kind.
Be kind. Oh, that's it. Yeah, hashtag be kind. Labour's full of hashtag be kind. And look at how nasty he's going. Look how deep down... terribly reprehensible. It's unforgivable. I go back to the signature. I keep going back to this signature.
I haven't even noticed it.
That's massive. That's massive. The fact that he is signing off all of this. Loophole for ex-doms, let me sign it off. Pedos going free, let me sign it off. I think that's the real unforgivable thing.
I think it's very clever on the part of Labour, because you look at that, there it is on the screens for those who are watching on television, you look at that and you think, oh, that's a message from Rishi. And if you don't read it too carefully, you might get exactly the impression that Labour are trying to...
But isn't it funny that everyone sort of draws different things from it? Because, Nana, you sort of... The signature you were oblivious to.
I didn't notice the signature, I just got annoyed.
Isn't it funny that we all pick on different
The
things?
first thing that I saw was just the messages.
But don't forget also...
That's so stupid.
Back in 1997, I know this has been said before, but, you know, the Tories with Saatchi and Saatchi, they put out the demonic Tony Blair poster, so they removed his eyes. Do you remember that?
Yes, but you know that Lizzie Cundy's father was the person who's behind that campaign.
Is that right? So he's from Saatchi and Saatchi? Wow, such a clever thing. But that backfired because, of course, he...
They produced that amazing ad, but Labour isn't working, which is what saw Thatcher come in on a great round in 1979. That was one of the first of the really negative...
Yeah, but he's doubled down. Keir Starmer's doubled down now, hasn't he? He refuses to back down on this one.
I think
deeply personal.
He can't back down, though.
The problem with this is this sort of links with the fact that then he can't say what a woman is and all that.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, these are basic things and you're messing them up. And so I don't think I could trust him to lead the country.
No.
What is interesting is that quite a large number of his colleagues, senior colleagues, have not endorsed it. They haven't retweeted it. They haven't put their endorsement on it, which shows that a lot of them are very unhappy with it.
I think it's going to backfire. I said this before. If I was a constituent, I would think of two things with Keir Starmer. I would think of that photograph of him taking the knee.
Yep. Well done, yes.
Yeah, either in his offices or at home, with those incredibly high ceilings. High ceilings means that you're living in a big, grand house, by the way. And also, I'd think of these posters.
Well, let's see what you think of this show. It's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices on. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go? Should we go to Solihull?
Oh, West Midlands.
Let's have a chat with Brian Dugan. Dukes. Hello, do they call you Dukes? Do your mates call you that? Maybe not. Perhaps they don't.
They do now.
They do then. All right, Brian, you've grown a big moustache. That was like in a week. Brian, talk to me. What do you think about this?
Hi, Nana. Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that Keir Starmer, who has been sometimes lampooned a little bit for being a kind of bastion of civility, is now kind of almost being demonised for being with the dogs. I think, look, it's interesting in terms of the debate there. Christine and Danny referred to the Savile incident, shall we say, when Starmer was director of the DPP and supposedly didn't go after Savile. It's just untrue. And that's where this all started. Boris Johnson made that claim, and it's an untruth. And now that Labour are going to fight fire with fire, suddenly, you know, Keir Starmer is reprehensible. Well, listen, I don't buy it. And that's not to say that I go along with kind of this kind of dirty politics, if you like. I don't think it does the country any good. I don't think it does people's lives any good. We shouldn't really be going to these places at all. We should be debating the issues that mean so much and that are so important and we have to address as a nation. But I think to single out Keir Starmer for this, I think listen, we're definitely on a one-track mind if we're doing it that way.
Well, listen, Brian, thank you so much for your thoughts. It's good to see you. There's Brian Dugan with the extra big moustache. You've grown that quite quickly. It's a couple of weeks.
Santa Claus next Sunday.
Single out Keir Starmer because he's the figurehead. I mean, that's why they're going for Rishi, because he's the figurehead of the Tories. You have to go and single out Starmer.
So were you right about Savile?
Well, as I understand it, Savile, Keir Starmer was the director of the DPP when all the Savile business was going on, and he was in a position, with hindsight, OK, to have realised. I feel he must have known things that...
But that's...
If he knows.
You can only go on evidence.
But he may not have known things.
He may not have known.
But it's irrelevant.
He says
it's irrelevant. The point of this is not whether he knew or whether he didn't. The fact that he was the head of it. So if he's reprimanding somebody about something that person is the head of, that person may well not know all the details. Then he shouldn't be doing... You know, you can't expect that not to come back.
Because they're using that to justify the latest
that not to bite him on the behind. But if you just joined us, welcome. Coming up to 48 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll be discussing whether we should ban horse racing following 3 deaths at the Grand National yesterday. And then at 4:50, Worldview, Paul Duddridge will be joining me to keep us up to date with what's going on in the US with Trump Watch. Stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Now, after 3 horses died at yesterday's Grand National and animal activists made headlines for delaying the race, many are now asking if horse jump racing is actually an outdated pastime. Animal Rising, the group responsible for the delays and protests, is calling for a total ban on the sport. But the trainer of one of the horses that died yesterday, Sandy Thompson, says that protesters are to blame for the animal's fatal fall. So, should we give in to the demands of animal rights campaigners and ban horse jump racing? Well, joining me now is Abby McGregor. She's a racehorse owner and a racing podcast host. Abby, there's a lot of call for it. I feel sorry for the horses. You know, they're being whipped all the time. They're jumping over these awful high things. I mean, for me, as a person, it looks frightening. Is it frightening to the horses? I mean, what do you make of what's going on?
I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there about, number one, how these horses are treated, and also how they actually feel about racing themselves. So these horses are bred to run. It's their biological instinct to run and to jump, and they love it. It's no different to when we're younger and we have this biological instinct to just get up and walk one day. And they have incredible care, absolutely incredible care. And in honour of the 3 horses that lost their lives in the races, which is terribly sad, and as a horse racing owner myself, my heart goes out to their connections. But I'm going to give you 3 things that we have done in recent years to make the Grand National safer, following extensive scientific research and extensive analysis. So number one, obviously we've lowered the fences. We've also changed the colour of the fences so it's visually clearer for the horses. The second thing is we've briefed the jockeys this year on how to run the race safely, not to win, how to run it safely, which shows that welfare is absolutely at the heart of everything that we do. And we've also made sure that the ground that they're running on means that they're travelling at less speed. And as a result of that, as a result of these measures, these active steps that we have taken as an industry, 99% of horses, over 99% of horses, come off of that track back to the paddock happy. And I would challenge Animal Rebellion. One thing they've done that has actually contributed positively to animal welfare in the horse racing industry.
So what about the point, though, that was made that actually the protesters may have disrupted the horses and actually potentially been one of the reasons why those horses died?
No, absolutely. And I think that just goes to show how little they understand these amazing equine heroes of ours. So they obviously thought that by not being physically present on the track when the horses were running, that wouldn't have any impact on them, that wouldn't distress them in any way. But it did. And that is probably, I can't speculate now. We will analyse what had happened there. But I would say that probably accounted for a lot of the falls, because the horses were parading for an extended period of time. Anyone who's got a dog or a cat or a pet will know they can sense disruption, they can sense tension. And so they put our athletes in danger. It's as simple as that. And so I would question, actually, was their campaign about animal welfare, or was it actually just a platform for them? Was it an act of self-promotion, advertisement?
Well, listen, Abby, thank you very much. That's Abby McGregor. She's a racehorse owner and horse racing podcast host. Let's have a quick chat with my panel on that. Danny, Kelly, what do you think? Do you think perhaps that was...
I couldn't watch it on Saturday. I haven't been able to watch it for the last 4 or 5 years because of the animal welfare, but I don't think it should be banned either. I think I agree with that lady. You know, without horse racing, those horses wouldn't have even been born. And I think that's one way you can look at it.
Christine?
Yes, and there would be a massive amount of unemployment and a massive jobs, the jockeys, the people who look after them, all the people involved in the training. The horses and their owners and trainers and jockeys have an incredible bond. The horses actually, you've only got to see the horses who become riderless. What do? They don't just suddenly pull up. They keep going.
But they run away from their owners.
Don't say breakneck.
They continue. If they really didn't like it, they wouldn't jump the jumps. They would swerve round. Well, because they wouldn't, because they've got no riders on them. They're doing what they want to do.
Goodness of that.
Imagine if I was on one of them.
I've not said anything.
Breakneck speed.
Breakneck speed, literally. Right now. Thank you, panel. It's time now for Worldview. And let's travel over to America, where we're going to speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Right, Paul, talk to me. Trump funding through the roof. People are putting money towards Donald Trump. Talk to me about this.
The indictment is good for business. This is all I can say. In the first 3 months of 2023, Trump raised $18 million for campaign funds. In the last 2 weeks, he's done about $17 million. So he's practically doubled his coffers just because of this indictment. So I think he's probably got 3 more indictments to come, and he's welcoming them. Frankly, they are extraordinarily good for fundraising. It really has energized that base. So it's been good news for Trump on that score. But sadly, the bad news is for Trump, I think that now Ron DeSantis has introduced a law in Florida banning abortions after 6 weeks. And I think that has now made it impossible for any Republican to win in 2024. It is an own goal of Keir Starmer proportions. It's quite extraordinary.
Really? So the Americans feel that strongly about this. So, but is there not a way around it that Trump could get around and change that, or would he be in support of it? It seems a bit odd that Ron DeSantis would do that.
Well, Trump has said he's pro-life when he was campaigning in 2016. However, it would be sensible for him to come out and just let the law. There's a thing called codifying. So we all get caught up in the Roe v. Wade and whether it's constitutional, etc. They can actually just pass a law in the US and make it the law of the land. The Democrats don't want to do that because it suits them. Because you could get Hunter Biden to win next year with this standing the way it is. These, the abortion rights being taken away. Trump, if he's sensible, will come out and request that it's actually codified for the United United States. I think now it's the only chance of winning, because there is no Republican can go up against any Democrat now without being shot down immediately. Remember, we talked about this with the midterm elections. We were the only people talking about this, that the new voter registration after the repeal of Roe v. Wade in the States, without being too technocratic, was resulting in a 2-to-1 women to men new voter registration. And a lot of those new voters were saying that this was the #1 issue. We had MAGA women, we had MAGA voters voting for Democrats because of the repeal of Roe v. Wade. And so this is a huge issue. I cannot quite believe that he's done it. The conspiracy theorist in me is that DeSantis knows he can't win, and so he's making it so that no Republican can win next year, and that leaves the field clear.
It sort of feels like the fox and the grapes, that Aesop fable where, if I can't have it, then nobody can, which is a bit dim, really, because unfortunately that means that there will be another Democrat at the head. And briefly then, we've got about 20 seconds. If it is unlikely that Joe Biden will be able to lead if the Democrats get in, who is their potential candidate?
Well, honestly, it probably will now have to be Kamala. I keep saying that Hillary is not off the table, but with this background, Kamala could do it. I swear. This is the horror of this. It's like, MAGA people will say one thing outside the voting booth. They will not vote for having abortion rights taken away. They will not vote for it. It's as simple as that. It's so unpopular. It's crazy.
Well, listen, Paul, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you. That's Paul Dudridge. He's there in LA. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour, including the Great British Debate. I'll be asking, should we scrap all smart motorways? The government have announced the building of a new smart motorway, but it's been scrapped over cost and safety concerns. But there are calls for the hard shoulder to be reinstated to all the existing ones. So I'm asking, should we scrap all smart motorways? And at 5, it's outside, my mystery guest. She's a reality TV star known for her antics on Big Brother. Who do you think she is? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, join me with my panel. We'll be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. All this on the way, but first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 5 o'clock. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer to RCN members was fair and reasonable, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay rise.
Our members neither think it's reasonable or fair. It's a short-term approach that plugs a gap by giving them a one-off, what they've described as a bonus. That's certainly not going to address the fundamental crisis that we've got within our nursing profession or within the NHS.
Labour has vowed to end what it describes as a postcode lottery for GP appointments if it wins the next election. The party says up to 3/4 of patients in some parts of England aren't able to see their doctor of choice, and only half the number of appointments are held face-to-face. Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained each year to 15,000. And Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says young people need more opportunities to enter the profession.
Unless the NHS has the staff it needs, it's going to struggle to treat patients on time. And we're going to end up in this bizarre situation where on one hand we're turning away straight A-grade students from studying medicine at university, whilst recruiting people from overseas in greater numbers than we're training our own homegrown staff, which is not fair to other countries around the world. But even more importantly, it's not fair to bright teenagers in Britain who could be promising doctors and medics of the future who are being denied the opportunity.
Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled over safety concerns, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. Conservative Party Chairman Greg Hands told Camilla Tominey the government's putting public safety first.
think it's been right for us to, as I say, look at the evidence, to come about it with bearing in mind all the factors that are involved, and that's why we've taken the decision, as a result of the public concern, to cease new smart motorways. That's what I think is the right decision.
The British Horse Racing Authority has robustly condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National as reckless. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it'll be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. The head of Sudan's army and paramilitary have agreed to a 3-hour humanitarian pause in fighting, according to the United Nations. At least 56 civilians have been killed and almost 600 injured as both forces battle for control across the capital, Khartoum. Global leaders have been holding crisis talks to try to bring an end to the conflict. Both sides claim to have taken the airport, presidential palace and state TV, which has since had its transmission cut. Tensions have escalated as political factions negotiate over a proposed transition to civilian rule following a military coup in 2021. More than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it is back to Nana.
Drive down in the morning. I'll get up early and drive down. Just think.
Online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Well, and on the way we'll be discussing so much this hour. Now, each Sunday at 5, I always like to give you a celebrity or a former MP who's had an extremely interesting career and talk about life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned, and what comes next on the outside. And today I'll be joined by somebody who shot to fame on season 2 of Big Brother in 2001. Any thoughts? She's a bit gobby. Can you guess who she might be? You'll find out very shortly. Don't go anywhere. Also, coming up in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap all smart motorways? The government have announced that building of all new smart motorways is being scrapped over the costs and safety concerns, but there are actually calls for the hard shoulder to be reinstated on existing ones. So should we actually bring them back for all? And then don't forget to email me all of your thoughts on gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Sorry. A little bit drink of my thing. What I've done is I've got this little cup, and inside the cup I've got some bit of ginger and hot lemon and water, and one of the bit of ginger's got stuck on my teeth. Sorry about that. Right, it's now time. You didn't need that, actually. It's time for this week's Outside. I probably could have got away with that. Today I'm joined by a reality TV star who shot to fame on Big Brother in 2001 and went on to appear on the Big Brother Panto in 2004 and also released a tell-all book about her experiences in the reality show, which was titled Big Brother, The Inside Story. She's now also a broadcaster, a social commentator, who you may well recognise is Narinder Kaur, reality star and commentator. Well done, Narinder. She won't shout, she's promised me.
I might shout. No, I won't shout. I won't shout. I won't give everyone a headache. Everyone's taken the Nurofen. They've told me that on Twitter.
Oh, did they? Well, listen, we've got to start at the beginning here, Narinder, because a lot of people, they hear you sort of going on and all these debates, but nobody really knows much about you, really. So that's if they haven't bought the book, by the way. But they haven't. They haven't bought that, have they not?
It didn't really do that great.
Well, you know.
But I'm glad you said reality TV star.
You are.
Because I was used to, 20 years ago, it was reality TV reject. And they used to put you in the bin in the papers. They'd have a bin and they'd get your face and put you in the bin. So we were rejected. We were rejects.
So what's your life been like then? You know, how many brothers and sisters have you got? Where were you born? What's the deal?
So I was actually born in the Midlands. We moved up to Newcastle. Family went up there. We bought a shop. I'm the youngest. And actually, when I went to school, and I think this is where the whole, because people say, oh, she's just jumping on some racism bandwagon. I grew up in Newcastle. I know you did too.
I did. I was born in Newcastle.
Yeah,
Geordie.
but same. Well, no, I was brought up there. But I experienced a lot of racism in Newcastle. I was the only person of colour in the entire school, in the whole area. So I was, I just was grown up with being called P word every single day. And that does affect you, but you kind of do get over it as you get older because, I don't know, you'd go through other experiences in life. But actually, after Big Brother, that racism, because obviously you become overnight famous, like hugely famous from Big Brother. And when you go from being, just a normal person to just everyone knowing you, then the racism becomes vivid again. And so I experienced it all over again. And actually I experienced it from press, kind of TV channels. And actually, for what it's worth, GBNews were the ones who put me back in.
Well, do you know what, though? Well, now you mentioned the racism. I was going to say it later, but on Dan's show, you mentioned the coconut word.
Yes, I did.
And you tell me about what you said about that, so, to remind the viewers, because you seem to think it was OK.
I do think it's OK.
OK, carry
I
on.
think it was completely OK, because I do think Rishi Sunak, Suella, Priti Patel, coconuts. And it's not racist, and I'll tell you why. Because racism is, and I haven't even bothered explaining it on my social media, coconut can be offensive or can be OK. I get called coconut. So my taste in music, I don't like Indian music. I like English music. I was raised with English music. So some may say, for example, Diljit Dosanjh, he's just opened Coachella. He's a very famous Punjabi singer. Don't really care. So my Indian followers will say, you're a bit of a coconut, because you prefer English music. Now, when I'm calling Suella and Rishi Priti Patel coconuts, it's offensive because actually...
So you know it's offensive?
Oh, yeah, because they are coconuts, because what they've done is they're being used, I think, as the brown faces to push racist policy and racist rhetoric.
OK.
They have.
Well, now you've explained it. It's good to hear that. But I actually think that it is racist, and it is racist because you're judging somebody by the colour of their skin, not the content of their character. So
it's about content of the character.
No. So you're basically saying that an Asian person or a black person should behave in a certain way. Hang on. And they're not behaving in that way. So you have a stereotype of what they're meant to be.
No.
And because they're not doing that, and they're doing something that you think a white person would do, then you're calling them a coconut. See, that's the problem.
No, that's not. That you've explained it all the wrong way, actually. Well, because I don't expect them to behave a certain way. But having said that, when you're a brown face and yourself, your parents were immigrants, and you're trying to start policy that is so disgusting towards asylum seekers and immigration seekers, you can't then say, but you came from that. You're weird. Your own parents were immigrants. And I don't buy that argument. Well, actually, that was legal. My parents came here legally. Doesn't mean they were welcomed. My father went through a lot of racism. My mum was called. They were called the P word every day. They weren't welcomed. But going back to the coconut word, it's not because I expect them to behave a certain way. I love English music, but I haven't forgotten where I've come from. Now, I'm not saying Rishi and Suella have got to remember where they've come from, but they are brown faces being used to push racist policy. They are.
So that's your view.
Yes.
But that, I think, then diminishes their own brilliance as people, because from what I can see, Rishi Sunak, even though I may not support some of his policies, is a brilliant politician, OK? He is there not because he's some sort of token and because of the colour of his skin.
I think he is.
He is there because he's good at what he does. He has managed to persuade... Look, Ursula von der Leyen, you saw the pussycat eyes that she was giving him. He's managed to get on with Macron. He's managed to get things done. Hang on. And it's not because he's not in the position because of the colour of his skin. He's there because the people in his party wanted him to lead it. And you saw the way they did everything to get rid of Liz Truss. She went. And
she was voted in because
I don't necessarily agree with the way it happened. But what I'm saying is people backed him because they thought he would do the job. And actually, looking at the job he's doing a whole lot better than any of the others. So I think you diminish his ability by saying, and Suella's, by saying that they're only there as a representative because of the colour of their skin. I think it's wrong, and it's also racist.
No, well,
it is
listen,
racist.
Should I tell you something? They aren't there. They are there because of the colour of their skin, actually.
No, that's racist.
Because Rishi Sunak wasn't... He would not have been voted in by members. The way he was put in was because they knew he'd never be voted in. And actually, Rishi and Suella Braverman is disgusting in the way she talks. She's a
No,
racist.
listen, no, hang on, wait.
By the way, when
I'm
you
going to
call
stop you
someone
there.
a
One
coconut...
second. So just in case anyone's offended by this, by the way, we do apologise, and also Suel's not here to defend herself. But let's move on. Okay. So anyway, in my view, that is what I think is very racist. And obviously, some people listening may be offended, and we do apologise deeply if you are offended by that.
Who would be offended by that, Nana?
I'm offended. No, I'm offended.
I'm offended by her policies and the way she talks.
But that's not based on the colour of her skin. So I think we need to.
This isn't.
No. Using that term is quite insulting.
You know, when you
anyway,
call someone the P word,
they're all insulting.
They're insulting because you're insulting an entire race.
Yeah.
When you call someone a coconut, it's personal. You're not insulting the whole race.
No, you're judging someone based on the colour of the skin.
I am judging.
No, it's wrong. It's wrong. It really is wrong. And I personally am offended by it. And I know people watching and listening will be offended by it. So again, I apologise if anybody is offended. But anyway, it was something that I wanted to talk to you about because I thought it was important that you know that actually there's another side to that conversation and a lot of people would be deeply offended by it. So I just wanted to bring that up. But let's move on because you have made some real waves of a lot of the things you said, but you've been doing a lot too. So we were talking about your family. We were talking about how many siblings you have, brothers and sisters. What's the deal with your family?
So 2 older brothers, but one brother passed away 3 years ago, just before COVID, of cancer. Another older brother in Newcastle, sisters in Newcastle. They have a shop in Newcastle. And that was a family business. So I grew up in a corner shop. I used to get up at like 5:30 in the morning, went from 7 years old, put the papers out. I don't like the whole, I've had a hard life, I've had it so... Because we've all had a hard life. We're all, we're all struggling now as well. But then I did Big Brother because a lot of people, I wanted to be famous. No one else would admit that. Back then, I thought I was a struggling actress. And I thought by doing Big Brother, it's going to put me on the map. But it put me on the map the wrong way. And I remember coming out of Big Brother and the public were fantastic. The love I got from the public was just lovely. People were nice. And the thing about Big Brother is, the public who love reality TV, they won't actually put up with racism. That's one thing they will not put up with, and they don't like anything that's kind of wrong. And they voted Nadia to win. She was a transvestite. She was the first transvestite to win.
Well, I think the British people are. I think they're very accepting. I'm very proud to be British.
Yes.
I'm accepting as well of all things. I like to think. So you got onto Big Brother. How and why did you go on there? And how did you get in? What was the...
And people think that you just turn up at the door and you with your suitcase. It was like 6 months of auditioning. And, I'd go along thinking, I'm not going to get in. And the other reason... You're going to laugh at this. I went in and I'd go to the auditions thinking, I'm never going to get into the house because I argued with everyone. And I thought, I'm not getting on with anyone.
They love that.
Well, I didn't know that then because, remember, my Big Brother was one of the first. So I'd go to the auditions thinking, oh, my God, I've argued with everyone. Oh, my God, I've upset everyone. And that's exactly the reason they chose me to go in the house. But when you go into Big Brother, it's like being stuck in this studio. You, me, Dan Wootton, Nigel Farage, all of us stuck together. And you're hungry and you've got no communication. You are ripped apart from everything you know and love. You're going to argue. So that's where all the arguments... Only a very strong person can last out 9-10 weeks and not argue with one single other person.
I'd be all right. I'd be all right with it, but I'd argue with all of them.
You might be first out.
I know. I'd be the last one out because they want to do all the horrible things to me. They want to see the arguments. But yeah, but it is interesting. So after that, you didn't win. Who won that one?
Brian Dowling.
Brian
Dowling, yeah, he was there. He won that one. I didn't win, and I came out, and I remember I wanted to carry on doing TV. I remember going to BBC, actually. I had a meeting with someone very high up there, and I'll never forget this. And they said to me, well, we can only put an Asian as a newsreader, really.
See, that's
And actually, we suggest you go to Indian channels. Go to, I don't know, whatever the Indian channels were there. I'd go to the Indian channels, but I came out of Big Brother, so I came out of mainstream. And they'd say, well, you're actually just a bit too Western for us. You need to go back to BBC or ITV. They didn't want me because they didn't know where to put an Indian woman who was opinionated. They said it will not sit right with any of our viewers. You need to just... I went away.
Well, you come to the right place.
At GB News. And when I came to GB News, my own community said, you're selling yourself short. Oh, my God, you've sold your soul to the devil. But actually... For all the criticism GB News gets, they put me on. They let me have my opinion. They want an Indian woman who's opinionated.
Do you know what we want? Do you know what we want? We want somebody who's got an opinion, whether you're Asian or whatever.
Whatever it is, exactly.
But we want people who are prepared to stand by their views and say what they think and be honest and genuine about it.
Yes.
And you do stand by your views. You're very honest and genuine about it. So what's next for you then? What in your head? Where would you see yourself, and what do you want to be?
Probably my own show on GBNews.
She's thinking about this show. I knew she was thinking about this.
But I think, I mean, when you say opinionated, I know I got into a lot of trouble with the whole Dylan, the whole being, and I know
what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. I really don't understand why yourself, and I know you don't, I don't like the term cis woman either, by the way. I don't like it. Having said that, it doesn't offend me that Dylan and trans women are used in adverts for women.
Nobody cares.
Why?
No.
What is the problem
It's not
there?
that. It's not that. It's more the fact that Dylan is not a woman. Dylan is a man. And Dylan is posing as though he's selling tampons and things like that, so he's promoting tampons. He will never have a period, so it doesn't make any sense to me. And then he is selling sports bras or promoting sports bras. He doesn't have any breasts and he's a man. And the problem with that is that there are some brilliant female athletes and people who would be brilliant for that.
They've never
and
used
these kind
that.
of but these kind of jobs are being taken by men. He's a man, and I don't want to see that. I want to see women being promoted and women being called women, not cis women, and I want to see trans women being called trans women because they're not women. There's a difference.
Well, I know, but in terms of the advertising, when I was growing up, every Nike advert or whatever it was, I didn't relate to. I really didn't care. There was, Kate Moss, no boobs, no hips, no thighs. I didn't relate to that.
Yeah, but she's still a woman. She's still a woman. That's why. Yeah, but she's still a woman. She still has periods.
I didn't relate as a woman. I didn't relate to it.
But no woman is going to relate. No woman's going to relate to a man selling those things. I don't relate to him. Do you relate to Dylan selling Nike bras?
I really don't.
If you didn't relate to Kate Moss, you're saying that you.
I don't relate to him either because he's got no boobs.
Well,
but either did Kate Moss.
Well, he's a man.
But I didn't relate to. But if you've got a woman pushing a pram, advertising a pram, she may not have a baby. That means nothing. I don't understand.
Well, no, we don't mind that. But
I don't like demonising trans women.
Nobody's demonising trans women. It's just saying that is actually an inappropriate use of this person. And in fact, I think they're being used by those big corporations, and I think that's wrong as well. It's not actually fair on Dylan either. Because if I was a trans woman and somebody said, would you do this for $150,000, I'd probably say yes. But then the backlash that has come with it for Dylan isn't actually very pleasant. So in my view, I think it's almost these companies are weaponising the trans community to try and push and get
He's also getting a lot of love. He's also getting a lot of support. My daughter's 15. She goes, it's not a big deal. She goes, I don't wake up every morning thinking he's taking my woman's space. It's not. It really isn't a big deal, Nana.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not to you, but Budweiser might think differently, seeing as their share price has gone off the cliff and they've lost.
Well, I hadn't even heard of Bud Light until he did it. So it's worked.
Well, a lot of people have, but a lot of people are firing at their cans and all sorts of stuff. So it's not really working out well for them. But it's been great to talk to you, Narinda.
Time flies.
Temper Suited.
Is that it?
That's great,
Oh.
Narinda Kerr. Thank you so much. She's been my outside guest. She's not that shouty. She's all right, isn't she? She's a reality star. And we love her here at GB News. Thank you so much, Narinda. It's lovely to talk to you. Right, coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we scrap smart motorways altogether? Stay tuned. It's on the way next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online, and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should we get rid of all smart motorways? Now, the government have confirmed that the building of all new smart motorways is being cancelled because of cost and safety concerns. 14 planned schemes, which includes 11 already on pause, and 3 set for construction are set to be scrapped due to the finances and low public confidence. So what do you think? Smart motorways are awful, I think, personally. Excuse me. They stretch... it's my asthma. Sorry. They use the hard shoulders as an extra lane of traffic, which critics claim has led to road death. So should we scrap them altogether? Right, joining me for the Great British Debate is Communications Officer at the IEA, Reem Ibrahim, and journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Just the two of you, then? All right, great. Well, we'll start with Reem.
Yes, so I think obviously the stats behind these smart motorways, it seems as though there is a slightly higher risk of death when it comes to these. I mean, obviously traffic accidents happen all the time and they're incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. But I think that, motorways are only as safe as their drivers are. And I think actually when we take away this extra capacity, clearly this is the government's part of the government's wider plan to take away this extra capacity, which is now going to mean that more people are now forced to use public transport.
I think your mic's going, Reem. I'm going to go to Danny and we'll come back to you. Danny?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a fan of smart motorways. I drive 100 miles from the Midlands to come down to the studios every Sunday. And this afternoon I counted 5 cars that had broken down, and they were in the safety and the sanctuary of a hard shoulder, an established hard shoulder. Lots of driver error, though. We saw earlier on in the show that there was a caravan that was wiped out on the hard shoulder or the live lane.
No, it wasn't on the hard shoulder. It was actually on... What it had done is...
It was the live lane. It was the running...
The live lane.
Yeah, but that can revert back to a hard shoulder.
No, it didn't. But what what it had done is it was squished up. So, like you've got the 4 lanes, then you've got like this one thin sort of slither of not really a lane, but just a little space.
That's the hard shoulder.
No. That wasn't a hard shoulder. That was actually just a slither, little bit there. And it had pushed itself in as close as it could. But it wasn't the hard shoulder, so it was not on.
The point was that depending on whether it's a live lane, it can be a hard shoulder. So on that day, at that time, that was a live lane, and so that was driver error that caused the truck behind it to smash into it.
No.
Of course it was. It wasn't deliberate though.
No. But what you saw there, and obviously I'll see if we can play the clip. What you saw, you had 4 lanes, and then you had a caravan, a car pulling a caravan, and because there was no hard shoulder or nowhere for it to pull into or no lay-by, the caravan had gone as close as it could to the edge of the actual road, so off, maybe 3/4 of it were on the on the little tiny slither, and a little bit was on the main lane. So that's what happened.
OK, so I'm a fan of them in general. I do a lot of motoring, a lot of driving, and I think so long as the controls are in place and so long as the system works. One thing that I was unaware of until we spoke to that lady who tragically lost her husband. One thing I was unaware of was how ineffective the system is. So my position, after listening to Claire's story once again, my position has shifted somewhat to saying that they should be banned until the system works correctly. Now, I know that's different to Claire's view, but my position, based on what I learned this afternoon, that the cameras aren't being effectively manned, then my position has changed, that unless everything is working correctly, like a Swiss watch, they shouldn't be using the hard shoulders of live lane.
So in the meantime, whilst you're waiting for them to fix this, because they've said about fixing them and doing all this, but they still haven't done it. So in the meantime, people are still driving on them.
So what I was saying, what do we do with the one? If that's your position, what do we do with the ones that already exist? I mean, the M25 is entirely a smart motorway already. So what do we do with the ones that are already there that people are using daily to get to work and to do their daily commute and to take the kids to school? What are we going to do with that?
Well, my position is clear. I said a second ago, until we have it effectively working, I don't think we should use the hard shoulder as a live lane. Until we get it effectively
don't
working.
Use the hard shoulder as a live lane. So you should, in fact, reinstate the hard shoulder until they've actually got the...
The amount of capacity that we'd lose if we did that, the amount of traffic that we'd have, I mean, this is clearly part of the government's wider agenda to get us out of our cars and into the public transport. Now, that's very easy for us down here in London to say we've got TfL and we've got a fantastic transport system, but what about those that are living in the suburbs, those that are living outside of London, more rural areas? They need their cars and they rely on the hard shoulder to have that increased capacity.
Well, I'm going to say people in London still need the hard shoulder.
Well, we all do, but even more so.
What I'm saying is people in London, just because there's a great transport network, you can't get a ladder.
I don't get the connection between a hard shoulder and trying to get us onto public transport. What's the connection?
Well, it's partly part of this reason we're trying to reduce the capacity on public transport. Same thing with ULEZ, same thing with all of these LTNs, that try getting people out of their cars, trying to get people moving. I think it's sort of part of this slightly more environmental agenda.
But did you not think that they created that so that they could have more traffic, to allow the traffic to flow more fluidly? Because they're thinking, right, we've got 4 lanes, one is a hard shoulder, let's turn it into a lane, and then we've got 4 lanes.
Yeah, so there's more capacity, So that's why I'm in support of smart motorways, because it increases the capacity.
So you're in support of smart motorways?
It does. I don't think it does increase the capacity. I think all it does is increase congestion. I think the same amount of cars are going to use the motorway, but they're going to be in more congestion. I'm not sure that there are going to be fewer cars on the road.
How does it increase congestion? It means they've got more lanes and more space for them to move.
Well, it increases congestion. Sorry, a 3-lane live running motorway will be more congested if there are 3 lanes as opposed to 4 lanes.
Yes.
And so I don't think it's going to reduce capacity. I think the same amount of cars are still going to be on the same motorways. It's just that there'll be 3 lanes rather than 4 lanes. I don't think people are not going to drive on the motorways.
And also, the problem with this argument as well is that they all end up going somewhere, and all you end up with a bottleneck, but with more cars running through this bottleneck. So aren't you better off actually having... And then if there is an accident on a motorway that has 3 live running lanes and no hard shoulder...
I just don't buy this argument.
When there's an accident, then you have to stop the whole motorway. That's the problem. So, and people make mistakes, and there are accidents. So every time there's an accident on a smart motorway, the entire motorway stops, rather than a hard shoulder where they can go and the traffic can carry on. So I think it's a false.
I just don't buy the argument that adding an extra lane doesn't somehow increase capacity. I mean, it's literally adding an extra lane for more of these cars to move through and manoeuvre through. I mean, I don't understand
I'm confused at your argument. Are you saying that an extra lane gives more capacity?
Yes, and it reduces the congestion.
But the point with the smart motorway is, though, Reem, can you just address this situation? If there is an accident on a 3-lane live running motorway and there is no hard shoulder, normally what would happen is everything would be on the hard shoulder and the traffic would carry on moving. If that happens, the entire motorway stops for 45 minutes, an hour, half an hour, a day.
Not the entire motorway, just that lane.
No, they don't do that. No, it doesn't work like that, though, because there isn't anywhere to push the traffic onto anything. So when there's an accident, do you drive?
I actually don't drive,
right,
no.
I thought so. That's why this is difficult. When there's an accident, the entire motorway is closed on a smart motorway because you have to move the traffic out of whatever lane it's in, and you have to stop the traffic. Otherwise, if there's a hard shoulder, you can move the traffic into the hard shoulder and the motorway can carry on running. That's the problem.
But that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. A motorway doesn't run on a hard shoulder. They will close down a 3-lane motorway or a 4-lane motorway until it's safe to get the cars going through.
Yes, but you can move the accident to a hard shoulder.
Yes, and you can do that with a live lane. You just close it.
But you can carry on with the motorway moving.
All you do is close that lane.
You don't need to close the entire motorway.
Yes, but OK, the problem with that, you're saying that, but the issue is with if you've got a smart motorway, is that whatever that accident is, you have to close the whole thing. If you have a hard shoulder, they can pull out into the hard shoulder. So you're more likely to get people pulling into the hard shoulder and not breaking down in a live lane. Do you get that?
No, my experience
You've got time to get into a hard shoulder. It's there all the time.
It can revert back to being a hard shoulder.
Yeah, but it depends.
That's why it's a smart motorway. It's flexible.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. You guys, listen. OK, I'll try one more time.
I drive on them. You don't.
I drive on them all the time.
You say you don't drive on smart motorways.
I drive them all the time, but I avoid them if I can. So I've driven on them for many, many years.
Why do you avoid them?
because I know that if my car breaks down, and bless it, it's old, I know that, first of all, it may not make it to a hard shoulder, and secondly, I'll be in all lanes running a motorway unless somebody has pressed an X, or I'm going to have to sit in my car, and I don't fancy the odds. That's why. OK, well, I have a great selection of used cars for sale, guaranteed not to break down.
Get yourself a new car, Nana, I think.
On the hard shoulder.
Just to get myself a new car. Lots of new cars break down as well. No, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. I know if you're in a live running motorway, all lanes running, and there's an accident or there's a problem with your car, if you have a hard shoulder, you have more chance of being able to pull over, of course, than you have if you have all lanes running. And if you have nowhere to go and your car is breaking down, you have to sit there and allow it to break down, unless you can go left. And if there's no hard shoulder, it's coupled with whole motorway.
And then you're reliant on the technology working.
Yeah, which we know.
Which goes back to my earlier point.
I think we're in agreement the technology has to work in order for this to work and move forward.
In which case, in the meantime, put a hard shoulder in. That's what I think we're at. Right, well, listen, if you just joined me, welcome on board. What are your thoughts? This is GB News on TV, online, on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We'll continue with that great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should all smart motorways be scrapped? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel. I've got the commentator and author Christine Hamilton, and also the fabulous Danny Kelly. That's on the way. First, though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 5:33. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider their planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer to RCN members was fair and reasonable, and their decision to hold a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay increase. Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled because of concerns over safety, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The British Horse Racing Authority has condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National yesterday. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event, slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it will be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. And more than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month, the largest military ceremonial operation in 70 years. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in the front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Oh, crikey. Oh, sorry. I was so busy chatting. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. We'll continue with our great British debate. Should all smart motorways be scrapped? And we'll be sharing some of our thoughts. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, let's turn back once again to my Great British debate. After the government announced that the building of a new smart motorway is to be cancelled following the concerns over safety and costs, 14 planned smart motorways, including 11 that are already paused and 3 which have been marked for construction, will be removed from the government's road building plans. So for the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap all smart motorways? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Danny Kelly, also broadcaster at North of Christine Hamilton. Christine, we've spoken to Danny about it. What do you think? Should they be scrapped, all of them?
Yeah, I think they should. I think they're a cheapskate option because they didn't want to afford, and I understand that, and the public spending is up against a lot of pressures, but it's a very cheapskate option rather than widening motorways. If they're stopping building new ones because they're not deemed to be safe, why are they going on to complete the ones that are 3/4 of the way finished? I think it's the M56 and the M6. Why don't they stop them in their tracks? No, I'm not in favour of them. I know some people say that actually the statistics tell you that just as many people are killed on what you might call a normal motorway, but I haven't seen those statistics, so I don't fully accept that. 70 people have lost their lives. But it doesn't stand to reason you're stuck there like an absolute sitting dummy. You're a lemon, a dummy, whatever you want to call it. You have nowhere to go. And one of the caller you were talking to earlier who lost her partner, they couldn't even get over the hard shoulder. The 30-foot drop. I mean, you're just...
Well, you see, and the problem with... I mean, I was talking to Reem, who's never ever driven on a motorway because she doesn't drive.
Doesn't drive, no.
But, you know...
doesn't want to drive. She's only 20.
She's only 20. I was driving at 17, for goodness sake.
I was driving at 60.
But this... Really?
Not on big roads.
Illegally.
No, on aerodromes.
Come and get her, she's just
on aerodromes.
No, but... The problem is, for a minor collision or a minor accident, which is what happened in Claire's husband's case, the issue with it is that what happened isn't something that would have killed you. And with a hard shoulder, you can just pull over quite comfortably with the other car and the other driver. These guys did not have a major collision that caused any major disruption on the motorway. And that's the issue with the smart motorway, that if there is even just a minor thing, you don't know whether the person behind is going to go to the hard shoulder. You don't know where the little lay-by is going to be. So you may well do what they did, and you could end up dying for no reason at all, Danny. That's the problem.
My position has shifted significantly after listening to that lady whose husband was killed and after listening to the debate around hard shoulders. And it is softening to such an extent. I was reliant on the caveat of the technology working. But the more I think about it, the more I'm actually shifting to be in the same position as you two. And And yes, it's easy to say, and I hate the emotional blackmail of if it will just save one life. And I don't agree with emotional blackmail like that, because when do you stop?
Yes, you can't.
But I think for the sake of maybe an extra 10 or 15 minutes on a 100-mile journey like I've done today from London back up to the Midlands, and I think I would be prepared to sacrifice the slightly longer journey for other people's safety.
Well, yeah, and
well, we've all probably, if you've been stuck on the hard shoulder, a normal hard shoulder, that is terrifying enough. When you've got the cars rushing past you, that is frightening enough.
Yeah.
You thought that they were coming straight up behind me.
And the advice is stay in your car. If you break down in the middle, I'm sorry, you'd just be like, I don't know how you would sit there thinking, OK. You'd be a sitting duck.
The advice isn't to stay in your car.
No, the advice is to get out of your car.
No, the advice is to go left. So if there's a hard shoulder or lay-by, which there may be, there may not be, depends how your car's broken down.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the other advice is to stay in your car.
No, it's not.
No, the advice
is to get on the hard shoulder. Sorry, get on the grass verge.
No. But if there's no verge, there's no way.
Oh, of course. Stay in a metal barrier,
The is to stay in your car.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, and the problem there is that imagine that your car, if you may have been able to make it to a hard shoulder because, obviously, they're always there, always by the side of the road. But if you then have to get like a mile and a half or whatever the distance is, and they promised a mile and a half, but it turns out that a lot of them were even further apart, then you really are stuck.
You're you're just like a sitting duck target on a rifle range, aren't you?
Yeah, there's not many miles of motorway where you have elevated carriageways, though, which unfortunately was what killed that lady's husband.
That's not the point, is it?
No, but the point is you can just get out of your car, skip over the Armco barrier, and then you're on the grass verge.
Well, it depends how it depends, doesn't it? Because depends if it goes in
and you don't stay in the car.
But the bottom line is that if there was another lane,
I understand.
Go in,
I understand.
That would not be an issue.
My position has softened significantly.
Well, that's good. But this show's nothing without
That's
you and
the
your
result.
views. Yeah, here's a bit in it.
Yeah.
Right, let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing today. I've got 4 of you. Brilliant. Right, let's start with Julie Ford. She's there in Bedfordshire. Julie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, hi, Nana. Thanks very much. I have to say I'm with you and your panel there, to be honest. I'm not against smart motorways per se, but I certainly don't think at the moment they're fit for the purpose that the textbook was written for. The hard shoulder for me is somewhere that you should be able to go for safety and also for the emergency services safety as well. Yeah. The hard shoulder is somewhere you'll see the emergency service whizzing down so they can get to an accident. That hard shoulder's not there. They don't have the opportunity. They're weaving through the traffic, which would have snarled up on a smart motorway behind. So for me, I think smart motorways are great on paper, not so good in practice. Get the systems right and then maybe try again.
It's a really good point that you make as well for emergency service vehicles or anybody trying to get past the traffic to help or do something. It's a nightmare. Lee Harris in Bristol.
100% yes. We should get rid of all of them. I completely agree with the point you were making earlier, Nana. I'm really pleased this ridiculous Labour policy will be scrapped. Very welcome news. I remember when they were first mentioned and hearing concerns almost immediately about the hard shoulder. But we were told, the smart technology would mean it wouldn't be necessary. And it seems that instinct that we all had was right from the start. But just going to a couple of points, especially the one that you made, the technology does seem a bit ropey. It's never going to work 100% of the time, 24/7, which goes to your point about the hard shoulder. So it wasn't that long ago that they had to, the highways agent had to make a statement to say that they had to reboot the system. So the entire network went down for hours. And they even said that the boards would appear flashing completely random messages. So you're going to need to have a hard shoulder for those instances. It just seems absolute madness that it's taken this long to do it.
Right, thank you for that, Lee. Next, let's go to Miranda Richardson in Northampton. Not the Miranda Richardson, but she's there. Miranda, what's your thoughts?
Good afternoon, Nana.
Good afternoon.
I'm of the same opinion of everybody else. I think they're just horrendous. I'm in Northamptonshire, just on the M1, only about a mile and a half from the M1. And as they've done the stretch by us, we've had more accidents and more collisions and more losses of life whilst they've been building them, which they've only just finished one stretch by us recently. They're just not going to work. And especially as people, they don't read the signs when they tell you to drop to 60 on a normal motorway, let alone the smart motorway, and expecting everybody to follow that same rule because everybody thinks, oh, maybe that 50 mile an hour doesn't apply to me. So you're also relying on humans to follow their own instincts. So not having that safety point not having that hard shoulder. You know, I've been in the car with my family and had a tyre blowout and had to change it on the hard shoulder. What do? It's horrendous as that traffic.
There's too many variables. Too many variables. David Balm in Watford. David Balm.
Hi, hi, Nana. Hi to everyone. Actually, years and years ago, when this was first thing, I was put on a speed awareness course, and I was told this was all about smart motorways, how it was going to save lives, how it would be manned 24/7 by people on cameras. They would slow traffic down. They would be there to protect people, making sure that the roads ran smoothly. They haven't got enough people, trained people, to actually look behind the cameras. They haven't got enough people to actually slow it down. And Nana, I've been on a traffic jam where they had to smash. They've closed the motorway down. I had to sit there for 3 hours while they were doing it. And actually, at the end of it, I ended up with a really sore back from sitting in the car because you can't get out, you can't go anywhere. So yeah, please end them. Let's have the hard shoulders back. A lot easier.
Thank you so much, David. Really good thoughts. Thank you so much to my panel. Brilliant as ever. Julie Ford there, Lee Harris, Miranda Richardson and David Balm. Brilliant. Well, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views on smart motorways. Dave says, how can we keep using these smart motorways? Why does the Prime Minister feel that some of the population need to continue using unsafe motorways while others don't have to? Jimmy says we should only scrap all smart motorways if there are serious plans to upgrade the motorway network, which needs to happen. Smart motorways have improved traffic flow on some sections of the M62. Yeah, until there's an accident, Jimmy, and then, you know, and it can be a minor one as well. Rob says smart motorways might possibly work if the technology that was supposed to make them smart in the first place actually worked. It didn't. Maybe over the next few years, improved technology might come to the rescue of the existing smart motorways, and they will be the safe solution they were originally viewed as. That is a nice progressive view. Brian says all smart motorways must be removed. You know they won't do that, though, because that's the way they are. The technology will never be good enough as they rely on human beings to notice the breakdown. Noticeably on smart motorways, there is no space behind barriers to stand and be safe after you get out of a broken-down vehicle. That is the major problem, absolutely. Sue says no one has mentioned that if the emergency services do not have a hard shoulder, they cannot get to accidents quickly. Well, you were absolutely spot on. Only Julie just mentioned it, but you wouldn't have known that, but you were right. If she hadn't, nobody would have. So thank you very much. Great thoughts. Right, so it's now time for Supplement Sunday. Joining me now, my panel, Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly. Danny, I'm going to start with you. Danny, you're discussing... what are you talking about?
OK, basically, I couldn't watch the Grand National at the weekend because of the horses' safety. One thing that I was interested in, though, was this animal rebellion lot who were planning on disrupting the whole race. Now, I said this previously, that they need to be aware that they need the police to protect them. If they glue themselves to a fence, they need the police to protect them from the angry mob. They're going to get lynched, they really are. Now, they have said themselves that the animal rising ringleaders are going to threaten a summer of discontent with horse races. So they're going to go to, like, small provincial horse racing towns, and they are going to handcuff themselves to fences. And I promise you now, and there's only a couple of police at these events, and maybe half a dozen security, they will get battered by the race goers. People aren't going to put up with this, particularly after about 10 pints of strong lager. I hope not too. No, I'm not calling for it.
No, I know.
But all I'm saying is that is a realistic outcome of them spoiling people's day. That's all I'm saying.
It's not a football match, though, is it? They're not going to do what, like, football hooligans do, Danny?
Well, football hooligans, they go out to fight. But I promise you, it's a working-class sport, horse racing, generally speaking. I know that it's full of toffs at the big events, but if you go to small provincial racecourses, it's full of working-class blokes who are shipped in from different towns all around the area, working-class sport, and they won't take this nonsense.
Well, I don't think anyone should take that nonsense, but I see
their point. It isn't just toffs at the big races. The Grand National is a great leveller. Horse racing is a great leveller.
That's right.
It's the sport of everybody, from kings, I think in this case it's the Queen, downwards. It really is.
Well, let's do yours, Christine.
Mine. OK. Oh, well, I mean, this is unbelievable. There's a teacher at a £20,000 a year girls' school. Actually, it doesn't seem a great deal to me. I thought schools were rather more expensive than that, some of them. She has had to apologise for saying, "Good afternoon, girls." She went into the class and said, "Good afternoon, girls." It is a girls' school. It's an all-girls school. She's not allowed to say that. She had to apologise to all the pupils. Some of them apparently said that not everybody here identifies as female. They are all girls, but they don't all identify as female. She was very humiliatingly made to apologise by their headmistress, and she said that if their pronouns are different from their biological sex, she would need to involve the parents.
Oh, for goodness.
Quite. Anyway, she's lost her job. She has lost her job because she wasn't prepared to acknowledge that they weren't all girls.
I've had enough of this. This is absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Well, listen, I'm going to move on to my one now. We haven't mentioned the BBC, Danny.
I used to work there, you know.
Oh, there you go. I thought you might say that. Yes, the BBC has sent redundancy letters to some of its most famous news presenters. I mean, they've currently been going through a sort of Hunger Games style of sort of letting people know that they've lost their jobs on local radio and things like that. But now they're obviously coming for some of the most famous news presenters, including people like Hugh Edwards and Rita Chakrabarti, the cash-strapped corporation, although even though we pay a lot of money to it, I don't know where they're spending it, maybe Gary Lineker, which is trying to save costs by restructuring its news division, has written to all its senior TV and radio presenters asking them to consider voluntary redundancy. So I'm going to start with you, Danny. What do you make of this? I mean, they're trying to save millions. They're getting rid of some big names. But, I mean, while still taking on people like Gary Lineker and 3-something million.
1.3. It's curious about the redundancy because only for the last 4 or 5 years have those people been actually members of staff. OK, previously they're all contractual freelancers. So since IR35, I think it was. So they've only been members of staff for 4 or 5 years. It'll be really interesting to see how the BBC remunerates them with redundancy. It should be a month for every year. It'll be interesting to see if they get a load more than that.
Well, they might be able to claim that actually we were seen as staff across that time, and they may be able to get some.
Well, a lot of people were claiming that they weren't staff, whereas in fact 99% of what they were doing was for the BBC because you get reduced tax if you're not staff, if you're freelancer. So, and a lot of them, it was proved that they were in fact staff.
Yeah.
Look,
450 grand's a lot of dough.
This is tax, licence payers' money, so it's got to be spent wisely. Are they all worth it? No, they're not all. Let's not mention any names. You've already mentioned Mr Lineker.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't really single him out.
Well, why not? He's on 1.35 million. It's the most amount any of them are getting. And that could probably fund a load of local radio jobs that they've just got rid of. But anyway, on today's show, I've been asking, should we get rid of smart motorways? And according to our Twitter poll, 93% of you, that's a huge percentage, say yes, and 7% of you say no. I'm going to say a huge thank you to my fabulous panel, Christine Hamilton. Thank you very much, Christine. Lovely to see you. And also thank you so much to the fabulous Danny Kelly. Danny.
See you next Sunday.
Yeah, see you next Sunday. And thank you to you at home for your company. It's always a pleasure, as ever. I'll be back next week on Saturday at 3. See you then.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snell. Here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we go through the week ahead, for most of us it should be largely dry and settled. Always the best of the temperatures, however, in the west. So here's the situation at the moment. We've got high pressure beginning to build in across the country. These two weather fronts, however, will still be a focus of some cloud and some outbreaks of rain as we go into Monday. But looking back to the rest of Sunday, you can see actually still a lot of cloud around. Best of any late brightness down towards the southeast and East Anglia. The far north of Scotland also seeing some clear skies overnight. So here it might turn locally chilly, but elsewhere temperatures not falling much lower than 7 or 8 degrees. But it will be quite grey and murky in places, especially across any high ground. So just be a bit wary of that if you are travelling overnight. So a grey